Novel. Let's get to the chapters. Oh boy, I can't wait to make the announcement. Oh yeah, we start at chapter 14. Wait, what the heck? Oh yeah, chapter 14. Let's see. Just gonna now. All right. I'm gonna start the novel reading, and we reached the minute mark. Let's see. Okay, okay. Dum 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 dum. Hello. Okay, so we reached the minute mark. I'm gonna make the quick announcement though. So, for celebration for tomorrow, since the FNAF movie is coming back to theaters, I'm giving away. Hello, hello. Hey, hey, how's everyone going? So tomorrow, since the FNAF movie is coming back to theaters, as I said, I am giving a re-review, but I'm also giving away a digital code of the movie while unboxing the steelbook. Tomorrow, I'm gonna make a video of unboxing the steelbook, and there's gonna be a giveaway of the digital code. So there's a chance that while making the video and unboxing the steelbook, you can get a digital code. So the video is gonna like show the code, and you can get the digital code. That'll be my gift from me to you, to all of you. Let's see, whoever could get the digital code, that's gonna be in the video. You'll get to see the digital code, and whoever redeems it first, we're gonna congratulate you, and we're gonna give you like a photo card, like a drawing. All right. We're going to start with chapter 14 since that was the last chapter we started with. Chapter 14. Abby tries to concentrate on her drawing, but she was distracted. Her gaze kept drifting up from her pad. Her attention was drawn to the drawer that held the Freddy badge. Abby turns and looks down the hall toward her brother's room. His door was open, and she could hear a woman's voice, faint, just a mumber. Abby could make out the woman's words. It sounds like Mike was on his computer. Abby turns toward the drawer. Abandoning her artwork, she stood. She stepped over to the drawer and looked down at it. Okay, so maybe the badge was pretty cool. Just 'cause her stupid brother had tried to give it to her to make up for being the mean one the night before didn't mean the badge wasn't worth having. Abby grabbed the drawer handle and pulled. The drawer didn't open. She tried again, but the drawer was jammed. That wasn't something new. Most of the kitchen drawers got stuck regularly. Usually, if you just jiggle them. Abby tried that. She pulled again. Nope, the jar was shut tight. Alright, let's turn the page. Man, if only this is. Okay. Alrighty. Abby turned and braced herself again. The side of the corner, she thought that might give her something to push off, so she could push with more oof. She grabbed the handle and tried again. The news reporter on Mike's laptop screen was stepping into a lobby that was both the same and totally different than the one Mike knew. The floor was the friendly old black and white checkerboard. The walls were red and white striped, Freddy posters, red vinyl benches. Beyond these touchstones, however, the lobby was very different. For one thing, it was bright, lit up with brilliant white lights, and it was crowded. The blonde reporter stepped in front of a cluster of uniform. Crash! At first caught up in the video, Mike thought the sound had come from the screen. He quickly realized, though, that the racket wasn't recording. It was real. What the hell was that? He asked out loud. Immediately an answer put him in motion. Abby, he thought. Mike quickly set aside his laptop. He jumped up and ran out of his room. It took Mike only seconds to trot down the hallway. In those seconds, his mind suggested a number of possible catastrophes. He ignored the images and burst into the kitchen. There he stopped and looked at the floor. The first thing Mike saw on the floor was the upside down junk drawer. It laid at an angle against a battered old flashlight. Around the jar, an explosion of items, old pens, tacks, scraps of paper, a half empty spool of threads, and a pair of scissors, a couple old business cards, several takeout menus, a purple haired troll, and the fake Freddy badge was scattered across the kitchen faded green lines. Abby was standing over the mess. Mike opened his mouth and was going to yell at her about being careful, but when he saw the look on her face and what she held in her hands, his words dissolved in his head. Oh man, Mike thought. Missing in its cover pages, the thick stapled packet of paper that Abby clutched was the custody proposal Jane had given Mike. Clearly, given the crumbled devastation expression on Abby's face, she read the custody summons header. He'd never seen her look so hurt. Why didn't I stash that in my bedroom? Mike asked himself. Stupid. I made a mess, Abby said. Sorry. It's okay, Mike said. The mess was besides the point. How was he supposed to handle this? I'm not mad, Mike said. He held out a hand. Can I have that? Abby hesitated. As she held out the packet of paper, Mike took the papers, wanting very badly to beat himself over the head with it. Look, Mike said, they're just papers. They don't mean anything. Abby wrinkles her nose. She wasn't falling for that. Then why do you have them? She asked. It's complicated, Mike says. Abby gave him a, oh, come on, look. Mike tries again. Your Aunt Jane. I hate her, Abby erupts. She stomps a foot and crunches one of the old pens lying next to the crashed jars. She smells like cigarettes. Abby makes a something stinks face. And she adds, mean, she added. In spite of the seriousness of the situation, Mike couldn't help himself. He cracks a smile. Abby stomps her foot again this time. Her head narrowly missed the poor troll. Stop smiling, Abby commanded. It's not funny. Mike keeps smiling. I know, he said. It's just nice that there's something we can finally agree on. He was trying to lighten the mood, but Abby wasn't having it. You're gonna give me away? Abby asked. Her voice was small. How do I answer that? Mike asked himself. How can he explain the complex of the situation to a 10-year-old? Three shapes rap on his foot doorstep saved Mike from dealing with the issue. Attempting to hide his relief, Mike turns and strode toward the door. He pulled it back and his mouth gaped even further upon the door. Vanessa. Mike would have been more surprised if he found a news reporter with the 80s haircut on his front porch. An avalanche of questions rushed through Mike's head. What was Vanessa doing here? How did she even know where he lived? Was this official business? Was he in some kind of trouble? Mike looked past Vanessa, who was in full uniform, and eyes her black and white cruiser, which was parked in the street beyond his rolling heap. His poor car looked like it was trying to sink down into the grave. Humiliated by the comparison of his junkyard appearance next to the cruiser's sleek, shiny paint and chrome, Mike responds with, Hey, Mike, Vanessa says lightly. It was the friendly Vanessa speaking instead of himself. She didn't sound official at all. Mike couldn't get his tongue to work. Vanessa didn't seem to mind. She looks past Mike's shoulder, and her eyes widen in obvious surprise. And hello. Mike glances back and watches his sister tiptoe forward. He returns his attention to Vanessa and pulls the door farther open. Come in, he asks. Vanessa hesitates but then steps through the doorway. She didn't come all the way in, though. She stood in the doorway, blocking it, so he couldn't close the door. He shrugged. It was warm outside. Mike felt Abby come on behind him. He looked down and watched her lean out around him to eye Vanessa. Mike engaged his tongue. Vanessa, he said. This is Abby. Abby, Vanessa. Hello, Abby, Vanessa said, smiling. Mike thought the smile looked a little strange. Mike didn't tell me he had a daughter, Vanessa said. Abby makes a stink face. Gross. She's my sister, Mike explains. Vanessa smiles, relaxing to something more genuine. Ah, well, he didn't tell me he had a sister either. Vanessa points at Abby. Love your overalls, she says. She gave Abby a thumbs up. Are you here to arrest Mike? Abby asked. Vanessa puts her hands on her utility belt. She pulls her brows together into a stern frown. Why? She asked. What did he do? Okay. Oh my god, why the pages. Okay, there you go. Abby steps out from behind Mike. She sighs dramatically and throws out her hands. Where do I start? Mike watches Vanessa pull her lips together to suppress a smile. Hey Abby, Mike says to his sister, why didn't you go play in your room? I'm going to talk to Vanessa and then we can clean up the mess in the kitchen. Abby looks from Mike to Vanessa and back again to Mike, shrugging. She says, okay. Mike felt like he'd been beamed into another universe. Abby was going to cooperate? Abby walks up and tiptoes to her room and gave Vanessa a polite smile. Nice to meet you. She turns and skips down the halls. You too, Vanessa called. Vanessa and Mike both watch Abby go when she disappears into a room. They look at each other, then they both speak at once. What are you doing here? Mike asked. Someone broke into Freddy's, Vanessa said. Say what? Mike thought. Vanessa questions 1. Seriously? Mike said. What happened? Vanessa shook her head in disgust. Mike noticed that the sunlight made streaks in her hair that flashed like light streamers. From the look of the place, Vanessa said, World War III. Mike couldn't process that. He was distracted by the light show and Vanessa's up twisted hair. We got a call, Vanessa said. Apparently someone drove by and saw that the front door place was open. Starting at the words, apparently, Vanessa's voice took on a different tone. Gone was the light and friendly. Her words became cliff and severe. Mike glanced up at Vanessa. Her lips looked like they weren't even capable of smiling. They were carved into stone and threatened to crack as she went on. It doesn't look like anything was taken, but whoever was there sure had their fun. She was back in full on cop mode. Mike realizes her eyes were narrow, and she was expecting him like he was a criminal suspect. He was half tempted to ask if he needed a lawyer. Mike's shoulder stiffens. He clenches his teeth and growls out. Well, those cameras are everywhere. They must have recorded something. They did. Vanessa crosses her arms. They captured 8 hours and 42 minutes ago of static. She lifts a brow and looks at Mike questioningly. No doubt about it. Mike was a suspect. She was interrogating him. Mike has been joking around with himself when he thought about asking for a lawyer, but now he realized this wasn't even a joking matter. Even so, it was laughable and annoying. Mike was tired of being accused of being a screw up. Right, Mike snapped. Okay, just so we're clear, you're suggesting I had something to do with it? Vanessa fingers her baton. Give me a break, Mike thought. Are you saying you didn't? Vanessa asked. Mike lost his temper. Of course I didn't, he shouts. Vanessa pulls her chin and raises her eyebrows. She lifts the hand that wasn't carrying her police baton. She holds out the hand, palm up. Mike looks down and saw his prescription pills bottle was empty. Recognize this? Vanessa asked. An engine whirs into the street. Mike glances past Vanessa and saw his neighbor's shiny new red SUV rolling past. Great. The news of his arrest would be passed all through the neighborhood. No doubt Jay will get the win out of it. Hell, she probably already knew. Mike, who has been working up a head of steam that has been heated up from his bones, felt the blood drain away. He was sure he was probably look at me, I'm guilty palled. He swallowed and tried to work up enough saliva to speak. When he finally did, he stuttered out his response. It's not what you think, he said, sounding like it was exactly what she thought. Vanessa gave him a disbelieving look. He couldn't blame her for it. Mike tried again. They're sleeping pills, he said. I take them to sleep. He knew that wasn't exactly a stellar proclaim of righteousness, innocent. A night guard who took sleeping pills on the job wasn't a pillar of your virtue. I know what they are, Mike, Vanessa says. It's written right in the bottle. She didn't say duh, but her tone got the sentiment across. Mike couldn't come up with anything to say. He was busted, and he knew it. His shoulders slumped, and he hung his head. But then he felt a streak of annoyance in his belly. Okay, so he's been sleeping, but nothing has happened while he slept. The place has been fine when he left it. How is the break-in his fault? That thought gave Mike words. It wasn't my fault, he said. Vanessa snorted. Newsflash, if you're too whacked out to remember to lock the dang door when you leave your shift, Accident or not, you're liable. It's called criminal negligence. You were there too, Mike says. Vanessa bristles. I left the building before you did, and it's your job to lock it up. Mike frowns, but I was sure I did. He winces and whines at his tone. Vanessa sighs, her face softens just a little. Maybe the wine had made her feel sorry for him. The cop side of Vanessa retreats a bit. Her hand drops away from her baton. Her lips were no longer Granton light. She even reached out to pull a hand lightly on Mike's forearm. Maybe she was on his side after all. When Vanessa spoke, her voice was gentle. Mike, what the hell are you thinking? You're a security guard. Literally, your entire job description is to not go to sleep. Mike looks at the warped wood floor in front of his door. He really needed to take better care of this place. But when? And with what money? Mike was distracting himself. He sighs and looks up at Vanessa. You wouldn't understand, he said. Vanessa pulls back her hand. So help me understand, she says. Explain it. Because the second I file a report, the whole thing will be out of my hands. Mike glances down the halls towards Abby's room. He looks back at Vanessa. How should he handle this? Could he trust Vanessa with his story? Vanessa watches Mike steadily as he vacates. He probably didn't have much more time before. Hey, Mike said, deciding. You want to walk with me? Vanessa looks startled, then frowns and looks down the halls. Your sister? Mike points out toward his front door. Vanessa turns and looks toward the large concrete V that stretched away from Mike's house from the opposite of the street. It was a stormwater run off. We only go that far, Mike says. I'll be able to see the house from there. Vanessa hesitates, then she nods. Sure. Mike follows Vanessa out of his house. He closes and locks the door, then he led her down his driveway and across the street. Crossing a stripe of gravel, he offers Vanessa a hand, and he helps her up a grassy embankment that ran along the narrow concrete storm drain. The throw was filled with a brown, sludgy stream of water. Not exactly vents, Mike thought. Sometimes I sit over here, Mike said, gesturing the green grass slope. Gamey asked. Vanessa looked at the security's grass. In spite of recent rain, the tufts of green weren't wet. The sun had dried them out. Sure, Vanessa lowered herself to the ground, adjusting her utility belt with a snappy creak. They sat together in silence for a couple of minutes. The sun settled on the back of their shoulders. Mike thought it felt like a warm blanket. The water in the storm drain trickled past. In spite of its concrete motion, it had a stingle pond odor. Maybe not the best spot for a heart to heart talk, Mike thought. But then again, what did he know about heart to heart talks? It wasn't like he had a lot of them. Mike clears his throat. He might as well go for it. I used to have a brother, Mike said. His name was Garrett. Mike glances at Vanessa. She was just a couple feet from him, close enough for him to enjoy that vanilla apple flower scent he noticed before. She sat with her knees drawn up, her arms wrapped across her legs. She was at the angle, half facing the view, and half facing Mike. Her gaze was steady and focused only on Mike. He squirmed a little, but he kept going. When I was 12, Mike said, a little older than Abby is now, Garrett got taken, kidnapped. Vanessa makes a little sympathetic sound in the back of her throat, but she didn't speak, she just waited. I was there when it happened, Mike went on. I saw the car drive away, but the driver, the license plate, I couldn't tell the police anything useful, so they never found the guy who did it. The guilt and helplessness that Mike has felt then has carried with him ever since, slapped him like an actual blow to the face. He rubbed his jaw and managed to say, his voice breaking, they never found my brother. Vanessa still didn't say anything. Mike forces himself to go on. So there's this theory, he hesitated, trying to figure out how to explain it. It's physiologically, I guess, Mike says. Whatever it's a theory that we never forget things. Even when we think we've forgotten, we haven't. Vanessa frowns, obviously not tracking. Mike needed to do a better job at explaining things. Basically, Mike says, the theory says that all the events we experience, everything we've seen, all of it, even down to the tiniest detail, are stored somewhere in our brain. It's what we call, how do you call them? Our neutral pathways, like the brain highways. The stuff might seem as if it's lost, but it's not. It's just It's just buried. No memory is actually gone. Memories are always retrievable. You just need to know where to look. Vanessa nods. She seems to be getting it. You're talking about witnessing something? We deal with all that all the time in the law enforcement. Trauma buried stuff. Exactly, Mike says. Vanessa nods again. So your brother, you think you saw the person who took him? Mike shifts to face Vanessa. I know I did, he said. And I know the creep is in here. Mike taps his head. Buried somewhere. Vanessa nods again, this time more emphatically. Mike hurries on, wanting to get it all out of his head. Well, she was still following along, so every night, he says, I make sure I dream that dream, the one where I relive the kidnappings over and over. I go back through it and I search for details. I look for anything that might have missed at that time, or anything I might have seen but stuffed away because I couldn't deal with it. Mike pauses. He studies Vanessa's face. It was impossible to read. I tried explaining this to a couple of people, Mike said, and this is the point where they told me I was crazy. Mike waited, and because he was still watching Vanessa's face, he saw the instant transition. He's seen this alternative before. It was unmistakable. The narrow of the eyes, the stiffening of her mouth, the slight spasm of the muscles along her jawline. The woman sitting next to Mike was no longer the warm and supportive friend she felt like when he started talking. She was back in cop mode. No, Mike thought. It wasn't cop mode. It was something else. Mike watches, memorized as Vanessa iris deepens, noticeably in hue. They went from their usual soft grayish tone, blue, to a deeper indigo. The color shift was so pronounced that it almost looked computer generated. It was also enormously disquieting. Mike felt like he was watching a human turn into I know what's crazy looks like, Mike. Vanessa says her voice was comfortingly human, hard, but human. What you're saying that isn't it? She shook her head and her gaze drifted past Mike's face. Her eyes widened and her lower lip trembles, as if she was seeing what? Not even close to crazy, Vanessa says. From a nearby gnarly oak tree, which extends its branches over the slowly moving storm water, a crow caves. It flaps its wings and took off, dipping low in front of Mike and Vanessa and then soaring away. And just like that, Vanessa was relaxed again. She reaches into her pocket and pulls out Mike's pills. So these? Mike looks at the pills lying on Vanessa's palm. He shrugs. It's not easy finding your way back to the same place every night. It's taken years of practice, and I still need help. The pills, he turns again. They help. So they do other things as well. Familiar sounds, familiar sights. Vanessa smiles and nods. Planning for fun, she quotes his poster. Visit Nebraska, Mike finishes. He looks down and sad, suddenly embarrassed out of nowhere. His embarrassment turns into surprise when Vanessa reaches over and takes his hand. Mike was so stunned that he almost snatched his hand back in a reflection moment. He was glad he didn't, though. Vanessa's hand was warm and soft. It felt heartwarming and very welcome. I'm sorry, Vanessa says. Pressured, well, up behind Mike's eyes, he felt them begin to moisture. Clearing his throat, he turned and looked down at the constant concrete though, as he was gazing at the gorgeous river instead of the mucky storm-damaged system. And speaking of storms, Mike was battling one that was stirring up from within him, swirling like a forming hurricane over calm water. Years of regret and grief were blowing up inside him, threatening to hit landfalls and wreak havoc. Mike blinked away the tears that wanted to spill down his face. And then, just like that, the emotions would quill. The storm blew through, or maybe Mike just is in the eye of all of it. Whichever all he knew was that he now felt clear, determined. Mike turns to face Vanessa again. When he spoke, his voice was strong. I can change what happened to Garrett, he said. He's gone. That's on me. But the guy who took him? He's still out there. I know he is. Vanessa lets go of Mike's hand. And if you find him, then what? She turns over to her head. Just a reminder, you're still talking to an officer of the law. Her words sound like a challenge. When Mike caught the hint of a twinkle in her eye, he smiles. Well then, officer of the law, You can kick his door down and throw him in prison, obviously. Of course, Vanessa says. But she shook her head. Not to burst your bubble, but I'm pretty sure I, s- I saw him in a dream. Won't hold up in court. Vanessa and Mike grins at each other, and Mike felt something zing outside of him. It was a popular wow feeling that was much more intense than his casual appreciation of her beauty. And the zing felt like it was going both ways. The look Vanessa was giving Mike was one he has never seen before. Not directed at him, anyways. Her reception of his feelings was so strong that he felt himself leaning toward her. Vanessa flushes and she looks away from Mike. Your sister seems cool, Vanessa says. Is it just the two of you? And the moment was over. Okay. Mike nods. Yeah, our parents are gone. He hesitates. How much should he share about this info? Vanessa has returned her gaze to Mike. Her eyes have settled back into their usual soft blue. Encouraged, Mike keeps going. Mom kind of went bonkers after Garrett was taken. She was gone. I mean, not gone, gone, but they call it a depression. She wouldn't speak, barely moved for a long time. When she came out of that, she just sort of went through the motions. This continued on for longer. She acted like a mom, but she wasn't the mom she used to be. When Mike paused, Vanessa didn't move. Her direct gaze pulled the rest of the miserable story out of him. Then she got pregnant, Mike went on, and suddenly I had my mom back. She was cheerful, energetic. She joked, she laughed. The whole time she was expecting she was like that. I didn't know that. I found out after she thought she was going to have a boy. In her mind, which was still broken, even though she was acting normal, the baby would have been another Garrett. Vanessa nodded, but her lips were twisted insufferably. But the baby was Abby, Mike continued. And instead of being happy about her baby girl, Mom lost it. Worse than the first time, she just kind of wasted away. We, our family, limped it along like that for another years or so. Then, on my 18th birthday, Dad took off. Vanessa sucks in her breath. No, she whispered. Yeah, Mike said. I was already a screw up mess. Hard life, hard to be a regular teen when you're dragging around a semi truck of emotions. And even when dad was there, he didn't do much parenting. Mom was spending most of her time in bed. I took care of Abby pretty much from time on when she was born. But once dad was gone, it was all on me. Even figuring out how to support her. Mom died, and that was it for me. No, nothing happened. Mike presses his lips together, once again holding back tears. Vanessa puts a hand on Mike's thigh. The warmth flipped his focus from bad memories to the good ones. You know, Mike said, when Gary and I were kids, my mom and dad, they were like those perfect parents you see on old TV shows. Lots of fun, gave me tons of attention, family dinner every night. Mike bit his lip and lifted one of his shoulders in a half shrug. We even used to hold hands around the table and say grace. Vanessa squeezes Mike's thigh slightly. That actually sounds really nice, she said. Her words sound genuine, maybe a bit nice. Mike sighs. I always thought it was silly until it was over. Vanessa looks down at the eddying sludge in the curve below them. For a full minute she said nothing. Mike talks out sat silently. The way it was with your parents before, Vanessa says. It sounds like you were happy. Mike nods. And you and Abby? You still have each other, Vanessa went on. From where I sit, I say you're pretty lucky. College or not. Vanessa lightly bumps his knee with her. Mike took that very well to mean she wasn't judging him for the bitterness. Mike smiles at her. Vanessa returns the smile and she gazes at him steadily. Vanessa's attentiveness drains the remaining tension from Mike's body. He felt more relaxed than he had in a long time. But then once again, the blue in Vanessa's eyes got darker, and her focus, although still on Mike, blurred. He felt like she drifted off in her own mind. He sensed a strong disconnection. Something has cut the link that was forming between them. That something, Mike thought, hinted on a secret hidden in Vanessa's past. Would she share it with him? The police radio clips on the shoulder of Vanessa's uniform. Spat static. Vanessa tenses and glances down at it. Did you always want to be a cop? Mike blurts out. He wanted to jumpstart the personal connections with her again. Vanessa lifts her gaze on Mike's face. Yes, she said. Mike wanted to see if she elaborates, but she didn't. Still, the one word was enough. Mike sure it was contained a novel-sized story. Vanessa had reasons for wanting to be a cop. She wasn't, however, going to share them with him right now. I always wanted to be a builder, Mike said. A contractor. Maybe own a construction company. He blew out air. Maybe in another life. Vanessa didn't say anything. Mike felt awkward, like he was oversharing. I should go, Vanessa said. She brushes off her dark blue pants. Mike stood and similarly swiped at his jeans. Fragrant braids of grass and a few leaves spiral around her legs and settle at her feet. Mike and Vanessa started walking back towards his house. Mike glances at her. What's about your report? He asks. All right. Vanessa lifts her hand. She still held Mike's pill bottle. Mike tenses, but then Vanessa turns and tosses the pill bottle over her shoulder. It bounces down the concrete side of the storm drain and lands in the dripple of grunky brown water. It begins tumbling away from them in slow motion, spinning around and around. Promise me one thing, Vanessa says. Mike looks at her. She was leaning towards him, her eyes once again dark blue. Her eyes squint forcefully. Mike almost physically recoiled from the power of her gaze. What? He asked. No more sleeping, Vanessa says. When you're at Freddy's, you stay alert. Mike nods, but he was glad he didn't have to have a Pinocchio nose when he was lying. He wasn't aware or sure if it was a promise he could keep. Alright. I just could turn on the lights, like it's getting dark going on. Alrighty. I can see now. Woohoo. Alright, chapter 15. I'm gonna just show my case real quick. Look at that. Look how cool it is. Yeah, look at that. Anyways, let's continue the story. Chapter 15. A couple hours after Vanessa left, Mike stood in his kitchen and watched the skies outside his window turn orange. For the fifth time, he redialed Max's number. When he put the phone to his ear, he heard the same thing he already heard 4 times. Hey, it's Maxine, Max's voice said. Leave a message or don't. Mike sighs and drops his phone. He glances over at Abby, already in her flannel PJ pink with bright red stars all over. Abby was sitting on the sofa. She had her dolphin tucked under one arm and her drawing pad on her lap. Of course she was drawing. The TV was in the background. And of course she didn't seem to be paying attention to it. Mike looks back outside again. The sky was still orange, and the orange color was getting deeper. He looked at his watch. He was running out of time. Where are you? Mike asks out loud as he dials Max's number for the sixth time. Mike listens to Max's message once again. He heaves another louder sigh. He looks over at Abby. She lifts her head and met his gaze. Rubble crunching over loose rocks and broken gravel engine lunging. Mike's old car coughs to a stop against the curb in the front of Freddy's. Mike looks through his windshield at the old building. This is a very bad idea, he thought. When the sun has gone down, a thin fog has rolled down out of the hills at the edge of the town. The moon, slightly larger throughout the night before, still managed to deliver its shine, but that shine was smeared by the dense air. The hazy moonlight of the pizzeria made the building look overly hazy. Mike's imagination turned the building into a big hand, just wanting to reach out and grab the car. Mike turns and looks at his sister, who sat primarily upright in the back seat, still in her PJs and with the dolphin in her hand. Abby was ensconced next to a large backpack, which Mike had stuffed with blankets for a hidey tent, and a sleeping bag. Abby was looking eagerly at Freddy's. You would have thought they were outside of an amusement park. This isn't a vacation, Abby. You're not here to have fun. Abby keeps her gaze on the pizzeria. Okay, she said. Mike deepens his voice, attempting to sound stern. I would work, he said. You will sleep, and under no circumstances are you allowed to leave my office? Abby kept staring at Freddy's. Mike leans over the seat and waves his front hand in front of his sister's face. I need you to look at me and tell me you understand. Abby didn't shift her gaze. I understand, she says. Mike raises his voice. Abby! Finally, Abby looks at him. I understand. Jeez. She manages to bury the words with 2 tons of attitudes. The heavy metal door clanks shut, as usual, after Mike ushers his sister inside the restaurant. As the bone rattling clank stops reverberating, Mike stares at the lobby in dismay. What happened? Abby asked. Mike gazes up from the broken glass to the rage holes in the drywall. He took in the benches as torn vinyl. He frowned at the steam corridors that seemed to lead down the hallway. Mike adjusts the strap of the large backpack. He is slung over his left shoulder. He looks down at his sister. Give me your hand. Surprisingly, she did so without hesitation. Mike begins guiding her forward. She did his best to weave around the worst of the glass shards, but navigating Abby to the destruction was unnerving. He felt like he was leading his sister to her execution. It smells funny in here, Abby says, as puts his body between her and the archway to the dining room. One glance, though, the arc told Mike that the damage in the room was even worse than what he was seeing in the lobby. Not that the hallway was much better. Like the lobby, the hallway floor was carpeted in glass, and the trail of the coins continued. Abby was right about the smell. Freddy's have never smelled great. But now the odors were even worse. The smell was putrid and made Mike's nostrils burn. Continuing to step carefully, Mike got through down the length of the halls. When he ushered her into the office. Once there, he let go of Abby's hand and shut the door. Abby stepped forward and looked around, her eyes bright and curious. The office, strangely, appeared to be untouched by the vandals. All the electronic equipment was as it should be. Huh, Mike thought. Dismayed and mysterious of why the vandals haven't destroyed the CCTV monitors, Mike turns his attention to getting Abby settled. He slips the backpack of his shoulders. Help me make your hidey tent, Mike says to Abby. Abby, who's been inching toward the desk and monitors, turns back towards Mike. She nodded. For the next few minutes, Abby and Mike worked together to form a hidey tent for the blankets, using the filing cabinets as tent posts. They unroll her sleeping bag, and Abby crawls inside it, once again snuggled into a ball on her side, with the dolphin pressed against her. Mike crouches on his heels in front of the makeshift tent. Was happy to see that Abby's lids were drooping. Do you want me to turn off the lights? He asked. Abby shook her head, her lid flew even lower. Good night, Mike said. Abby didn't respond, her eyes had closed. Mike backed through the overlapping blankets. He stared to let them fall together, but he paused when Abby spoke. It's like we're camping, Abby said. Her voice was nearly whispered, soft even. Mike opened his mouth to respond, but he saw his sister's mouth drop open slightly. Her breathing slowed down a while. Mike smiled and closed up the hidey tent. He exhaled softly. The concern that he was making was a mistake bringing Abby to Freddy's. But she's already tucked in. It's gonna be okay, he thought. Mike strangled and crossed over to the desk. He checked the CCTV monitors, scanning all the interior feeds. Wow, he thought. Someone really did a number on this place. Mike frowned. He was sure he locked up the night of the storm, but he felt guilty about what happened. He glanced at the hidey tent. Childish snorting sounds was coming from within the blankets. Mike looks back at the monitors. He sighs. Vandalism cleanup wasn't in his job description, but he couldn't leave the place this way. He listens to Abby snoring for a few more seconds. Then he leaves the office, closing the doors behind him. Looking at the closed door for a moment, Mike hesitated. She was safe in there, wasn't she? He shook off his worries. Sure, she was. Mike took a step forward and cringed at the crushing glass beneath his feet. Step one, he decided he had to be sweeping up all the glass. Resolved, Mike strode down the halls. He ignored the crackling and tinkling sound that his feet made as they shattered more glass and kicked errant quarters. Halfway down the halls, Mike stepped in front of the frosted glass fronted door of the supply closet. Opening the door, he reached in and up. He put his hands on the pull string that was from the closet's single bulb. Then he didn't hesitate. The closet wasn't covered by the CCTV monitors, and given the chaotic shambles in the rest of the pizzeria. He wasn't sure what he was going to find in there. Mike yanks on the pull string. The bulb came on, and Mike gazed at a perfectly ordinary collection of general equipment. Maybe it was a little jostle, but otherwise all seemed to be. Wait, what was that? Glancing at the open door, Mike notices a few drops of red on the glass. A faint smear. Was that blood? Mike shrugs. Maybe one of the vandals cut themselves. Mike steps forward and turns onto his left. Instantly, he jumps back. Oh, good grief, he said. What had startled him was the stupid balloon boy. Mike makes a face at the grinning little bug-eyed doll. How did you get in here? Mike asked the doll. Vandals with a sense of humor, he thought. Mike turns the boy's face toward the wall, ignoring the little pit at the path of his nerve endings. Why did the stupid doll get to him again? Mike grabs a push broom. He quickly turns around, tugs on the leg cord, and leaves the supply closet. He shuts the door firmly behind him. For the next couple of hours, Mike puts his nose to the grindstone. Having been a janitor several times, Mike could handle a broom like a pro. So the work, though, not the most fun he had in a while, wasn't difficult. Staring in the hallway, Mike swept everything that littered the floor into a pile that he pushed against one side of the wall of the dining room. The pile included all the glass from the halls and the lobby and the coins that were strewed around. He was tempted to go to the pile and pull out the coins. It would be kind of like panning out for gold, but he decided to deal with that later. Mike consults all of the dining room furniture, making another pile of broken chairs, but he decides to go to the arcade area first. He really couldn't do much with the broken chairs and the game cabinets. All he could really do was the sweeping. The glass that littered the floor there joined the other glass in the dining room pile. When he was sweeping in front of the stage, Mike encountered a yellow puddle and strong odor. Gross, Mike said. Pushing his broom ahead of him, Mike headed to the kitchen. When he passed through the service doors into the vast stainless steel domain, he sighed. This was going to be another big job, but Mike tackled it. Riding shelving units, returning pot and pans, dented but still usable to their places, and sweeping up more broken shards. These were thicker pieces of dinerware. Mike got the kitchen back in semi order. Then he returned to the task that had originally brought him here. He filled a couple buckets with a warm, soapy water. Mike took the buckets to the stage, returning to the supply closet to get a mop. But then he headed back to the stage again. He spent the next several minutes throughout cleaning the area at the base of the center stage. He even cleaned past that area, wanting to be sure he didn't miss a single speck of what the vandals had left behind. Once Mike was done with the cleanup, he left the buckets that were there. He takes care of them later. He was running out of steam, and still he had a lot to do. Returning to the supply closet, Mike found a dustpan and a box of heavy duty garbage bags. He then tackles the task of turning his pile of glass and debris into four tidy vandal trees. And he filters out the coins, not sure what to do with them. He gets a pile of quarters. Mike puts them in another bag. He took the overstuffed bags back to the loading docks, where he discovers how the vandals have gotten in. He found a broken padlock lying on the floor. A new one has already been installed on the door, and he saw that the back of the kitchen was already broken down. The break in hasn't been Mike's fault after all. Finally, Mike retreats to the archway with the bag of coins and his mop and the broom. He stops there to survey his handiwork, and he wasn't fully unsatisfied with it. The room looked better than it had. It was the best he could do at the moment. Mike took the mop and broom back to his supply closets. He stows the bag of coins there, too. Then his shoulder and back yells at him for all the physical labor he put him through. Mike returns to the office. Mike opens the office door slowly and he steps softly as he enters. He looks toward the hidey tent, and he was happy to hear that Happy was still snoring away. He glanced up at the clock above the tent. It was almost 4 a.m. Mike looks at the desk chair briefly. He thought about the promise he made to Vanessa, but the chair beckons and he was wiped out. Mike gave in to the need for rest, and his routine was over. He sets up a cassette player, rests on his gaze, on his tapped together poster, and in seconds his eyes were closing and the trees were saying in his mind, no pills needed. Okay, we're just get the charges. Oh my god, guys, the computer's dying. The computer's dying, guys. I think. Hold on, I just All right, we're on chapter 16. Let's do this. Abby Abby wasn't sure what woke her up, but something did. Sitting up, Abby rubbed her eyes and yawned. She listened, expecting to hear Mike moving around. When she didn't, she parted the overlap blankets of the makeshift hidey tent. She grinned. Mike was totally zonked out in the office chair, his head lowered backwards, his mouth hanging open, tucking Dolphin under her arm. Abby stood. She tiptoed over the desk. Mike, she whispered. Abby stepped forward and poked Mike lightly on the bicep. He snorted, but he didn't wake up. She grinned again, wider this time. Cool. Abby quickly ducks back inside her hidey tent. Setting down the dolphin, she ducks inside her sleeping bags to get the overalls she stashed there. Mike has thought she'd spend the night in her PJs, but she hopes to get the chance she had now, and she was prepared for it. Abby quickly changes into a pale pink tee and pulls darker pink overalls over it. She stuffs her PJs into the sleeping bag, and she tucks the dolphin into the bag too. Then she stood. I'll be right back, Abby told her dead to the world brother. Abby steps over to the office door. She eases it and opens it as she slits out the hallway. As the fringe of his consciousness, Mike thought he heard the soft click of the door closing. Or was that the chirp of one of those birds he could hear in the trees? A single bird chirp from the branches undazzles in the breeze. The branch creaks and the leaves rustle. Abby steps toward the archway and several the huge empty room that stretched out before her. No, not empty, Abby spots. A big pile of sad looking table and chairs. The shape of the pile reminded Abby of her sleeping bear. She hopes the table and chairs bear was happy. Abby gazes moves past the table and chair bear. On the other side of the room, wide stage curtains were closed over a long stage. She smiled and headed that way. Climbing up the short flight of stairs to the stage, Abby headed toward the middle of the curtains. When she got there, a thud sounded from behind the curtains. Then a clicky clack. Hello, Abby called out. She parted the curtains and looked behind them. The stage was like the inside of a hidey tent. In the middle of the night, Abby couldn't see a thing. I know you're back there, Abby said. You might as well come out. A burst of children laughter crackled from the stage speakers. How fun, Abby thought. Looking up the speakers behind her head, she giggled. Clever, she said, smiling. As a response to Abby's comment, the gear of the mining of the grinding metals and several thumping footsteps started coming to Abby's way. Abby smiled, weaving a little, but she wasn't pretty sure everything was going to be okay. The footsteps belonged to something big. Maybe it wasn't what Abby thought it was. Abby took a step back, but she kept hold of the curtain. She strained to see what was in the backstage area. A lurching surge of movement, more footsteps, made the stage shake under Abby's feet. They were heading towards Abby, and then Abby tilted her head back and gazed up, way up into the big white eyes of a bear. It was much more real looking bear than the table and chair bear. Mike's feeling no need to run because there's no point as he walks out of the thickness of the trees at the edge of the road. The black car rolls away, but Mike doesn't even glance at it. He's more interested in the blond boy who's sitting by himself in the middle of the dirt and gravel road, his back turned to Mike. Mike moves towards the boy. I know who you are, he says. The boy ignores him. All of you, Mike goes on. You're those kids, right? The ones who disappeared? Mike stops for a few feet in front of the boy, who is using a stick to draw something in the dirt. A long time ago, Mike said. I had a brother who disappeared too. The stick stops moving. The boy's head lifts, just a little. I don't know how it's possible that you can be here like this, Mike said, inside my dream, but I have to believe that you're here to help. The boy doesn't respond. Please, Mike said, leaning towards the boy. Help me remember the man who took my brother. Help me so he never hurts another kid again. I can't do this by myself. I tried, but it's buried too deep. The boy drops his stick as he stands and faces Mike. In flat tone, the boy speaks. If we show you, what would you give us? He asks. Mike doesn't hesitate. Anything, he said. Anything you want. The little boy rubs his up-toed nose with a dirty hand, leaving a smudge of dirt on the tip of it. His pale brow furrows toward as he twists his lip, clearing, turning hard. Mike waits and then the boy vanishes. Mike dashes forward and stands where the boy just stood. his frustration, but also irritated. Things are unfolding differently. The boy talks directly to him. He's making progress. Mike glances down at the dirt. He leans in to look what the boy has drawn. The drawing is a stick figure, but its shape is unmistakable. The boy drew a rabbit. Mike opens his eyes and rotates his stiff neck. He rubs his sore muscles and looks around the dim, quiet office, remembering that he wasn't alone here. Mike looks over the Heidi tent. He rubs his feet. The office chair skids backwards and slams into Credessa. The tent was wide open. The sleeping bag inside it was empty. Mike immediately realizes he has to charge toward the closet of the office door. Before he got halfway to it, a high pitched scream stops him in his tracks. Mike's heart went from zero to infinite in a nanoseconds. He spun around and rushed to the CCTV monitors, scanning them quickly. His eyes nearly shot out of his head and ping-ponged across the room. Abby? Mike gasped. He took off pell-mell toward the dining room. How could I be so stupid? Mike asked himself as he barreled down the halls. It was Garrett all over again. Abby! Mike shouted as he burst through the hallways and charged into the dining room. Mike instance felt like they were reaching up inside of him to strangle his lungs. As he blasted toward the room, he kept his horrifying gaze on the massive jumble of animatronics in front of the main stage. Abby's screams were coming from within the snot of metal rotting fur. What were those things doing to her? Stop! Mike screamed. Stop it, let her go. Racing past the pile of furniture, Mike grabs a broken chair. It was the only weapon that was available for him. As Mike raises the chair over his head, pokes to the strike, one of the metal and fur moon wraps around Abby, broke free of the melee. It was Freddy. The gargantuan bear charged straight toward Mike. Mike's breathing choked in his throat. He wanted to turn and run, but he couldn't. He had to save his sister. Mike tightens to his grip on his makeshift weapon. He braces his feet on the floor. Freddy came closer and closer and closer, and he stopped a few inches from Mike. Mike held his breath, gears grinding, eyes flashing in obvious anger. Then the animatronic bear leaned down and put his face right in front of Mike. The bear's scratching dirty black nose nearly touched Mike's nose. Mike closes his eyes and screwed up his face. He started to swing the chair, even though he knew it was not gonna help him at all. Mike, Abby called out, "You're here!" Mike opened his eyes and watched in disbelief as his sister, who was just fine, skipped towards him and the bear. She let out a carefree laugh and she gave the robotic creature a big hug. Mike gazed at his sister. They wouldn't stop tickling me, Mike, Abby said. I thought I was gonna die. Seriously? Tickling? Mike lowered his arm. The chair hit the floor with a clacker. The heck is going on? Mike struggled to compute the situation to put into a box, but he couldn't do it. Freddy, Abby said, this is my brother, Mike. He works here. Freddy raises his head away from Mike's face, just a little. Mike didn't move a muscle. His instincts eased up in his lungs. The animatronic's eyes were still bright, but they didn't give off the same signal the rage Mike has felt. Coming from the bear was giving away to seems cautiously curious. Freddy straightened, but he kept studying Mike. He scanned Mike's from head to toe. Mike hoped he passed mustard. Abby, Mike said quietly, as he stood in front of a wild animal. Actually, a wild animal might have been an improvement in this situation. Are you okay? Abby grabs Mike's hand and she giggles. What's going on? Mike asks, just as softly. Abby looks up at Mike with more happiness than he has ever seen in her eyes. Come on, she said. I want you to meet the others. The others? Feeling like he had little choice in the matter, Mike let Abby pull him from forward. Too dazed to resist, Mike realized Abby was dragging him over to where the rest of the animatronics were. The chick, the bunny, the fox. The fox with the sharp metal hook? Great, Mike thought. Mike was still ultra worried, but the other three animatronics seemed to find Mike as interesting as Freddy did. They eyed him, which was truly looked either curiously. Mike found himself intrigued by how these aging monsters of metal, of fur, could look so childlike. Mike, Abby said, this is Chica, Bonnie, and Foxy. She turns to the animatronics. Everyone, this is Mike. One by one, and more than a bit shyly, the animatronics lift ragged paws and wave at Mike. Acting from social conditioning, Mike starts to lift his hand for a return wave. He immediately realizes what he is doing, and he lowers his arm. In spite of the animatronic's apparent friendliness, Mike's self-preservation systems backs him up a step. When it did, Mike nearly bumps into Freddy, who was limping back to rejoin the others. Mike looks into the furry robots to his sister. This is a joke, right? He asks his sister. Mike frowns at the animatronics, every one of them broken parts, exposed and unconnected wires, and clearly crushed gears. How were these things moving around? Sure, the animatronics were jerky and cumbersome, but they were functional. How is that possible? Mike looks around. Something else is here, right? He said. He raises his voice. Someone's controlling them. Someone? Didn't step forward to take credit. Was it Vanessa? Mike wondered. How else did he know who might be able to do this? Annoyed, Mike shouted, Very funny. You got us. Congratulations. Mike glowered as he spun in a circle. He saw nothing but the empty room. Empty, that is, except for him and Abby and the moving animatronics. You hear me? Mike bellowed. The joke's over. You can come out now. The room threw Michael's words back at him. Otherwise, silence. Mike tries again. Hello? That too, after seeming to bounce off the dining room ceilings, returns to Mike. His ground teeth looks at the animatronics. There's no way, Mike muttered. It's not possible. Mike felt Abby take his hand. He looks down. For once, Mike felt their roles reversing. Mike was the kid, a very dumbstruck kid, and Abby was the knowing adult. It's okay, Mike, Abby said. Her voice was low and even, as if she was talking to a scared kitten. Mike frowns at Abby and then looks at the animatronics to the next. Since he has settled back where they belong and his lungs were giving him more air, Mike really looked at the creatures in front of him. Top hat, bib, bunny ears, pirate hook. These were the kids from his dreams. The truth hit Mike like a battering ram between his eyes. Whatever was happening with the animatronics was supernatural. Mike's voice crackled with a low tone. You're them. Beep, beep, beep. At first, Mike thought the sound was coming from inside his brain, a sort of ding, ding, ding of realization. Then he came to his senses. He looks at his watch. His alarm was going off. Then he came to his senses. Bee frowns at Mike's watch. Do we have to go home now? She asked. Mike looks at the animatronics. I think that's probably a good idea, he said. Abby nods. Her smile was gone. She was clearly let down, but she didn't argue. Mike starts to pull Abby toward the lobby. She freed her hand from his grasp. Hang on, she said. Abby pulled her drawing pad from the pocket of her bright pink overalls, and she dropped to a cross-legged position on the floor. She began scribbling away with one of her pencils. Abby, Mike said. 1 second, she said. I'm almost done. It was more than 1 second, but it wasn't more than 20 or so. Abby pops to her feet and tore up the paper she's been drawing on them. Skipping over the blue bunny, she handed it to him. The bunny, Bonnie, took the paper from Abby delicately. As it was the most precious thing in the world, he held out the paper so that animatronic could see other ones could see it. Mike took a step to the left so he can see it too. Mike tightened with an emotion he couldn't quite quantify. Was he worried? Freaked out? Abby had drawn a red heart on the paper. I had a lot of fun tonight, Abby told the animatronics. Thank you for playing with me. Before Mike could stop her, Abby rushed forward. She threw herself at the animatronics as they all folded their arms around her. Every muscle in Mike's body went stopped, like a bow drawn back, ready to fire. Immediately he relaxed, though, when he realizes the robots were just giving Abby a goodbye hug. Mike was tempted to pinch himself, so he see it wasn't a dream. Not his usual dream, but a dream nonetheless. The scene wasn't nonsensical as a dream, but Mike knew it wasn't a dream. He really was watching a bunch of jumbo-sized robots hugging his little sister. The spectacle was tender and terrifying. All right, it's chapter 17. Wait, so we went from chapter 14. Hold on. We're gonna go from chapters to 17. We're gonna go from 20. All right. Chapter 17. Mike carried his limp sister towards the bedroom doorway. She's falling into a deep sleep in the car, and she snorted most of the way home. He thought she might wake up when he lifted her out of the car, but she was totally out of it. I guess playing with the animatronics is exhausting, Mike thought as he gently placed Abby in her bed. Mike was trying to keep his mood light, but he wasn't really feeling it. The truth was, he was thoroughly frazzled by the night events. Mike pulled Abby's bright red blanket up to his shoulders. He watched her dress rise and fall slowly for a few seconds. Then he turns and starts toward her door. As Mike passes Abby's desk, he looks into a pile of drawings. He hesitates, and then he steps over to pick them up. Mike usually didn't pay a lot of attention to what Abby drew. Yet again, he sees the drawings she'd done that includes him, but he hasn't looked at anything she's drawn lately. Given what happened at Freddy's, Mike has a sudden feeling that he should see what his sister has been up to. We're gonna stop at chapter 27, okay? Expecting to see Abby's version of the animatronics at Freddy's, Mike flips through the drawings, and he nearly drops them. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Abby's drawings have improved a lot over the years. She was no Picasso, but what she drew was usually recognizable. The drawings Mike has held in his hands were clearly recognizable. He knew exactly what he was looking at. Mike held his hands a whole series of drawings of Abby's playing with the children from his dream. In one of them, Mike pulls the fourth drawing up from the pile, frowning at it. He places the other back on Abby's desk. He folded up the drawings and he takes one out of his pocket. By the time dinner rolled around, Mike felt like a limp noodle. After he puts Abby to bed, he tries to sleep himself. Visions of Abby's drawing, however, kept Mike awake. He was only able to get a few snatches of dreamless sleep. He finally given up and tried to jump start his body. With his usual routine of push-ups, the exercise has awoken him enough to be functional, but he still dragged all day. All day, Mike tried to get off and hold of Max. Why has she flicked out on him? Sure, he hasn't paid attention to her, but it wasn't like he was going to ignore him. Somehow, Mike has made it through the day. He even put together a meal, grilled cheese sandwiches and canned tomato soup, and shockingly, Abby was eating it. Watching Abby eat the sandwich, Mike leaned back in his seat and spun his spoon around and around the kitchen. Pleased with his sister's appetite, Mike inhaled the tang of the soup and the cheddar cheese, and he put in the sandwiches, and he tried to relax, but the thoughtness in his brain was too much of a ticket, and a ticket with torrents. Abby finishes the sandwich and raises her soup bowl with both hands. Eating down the soup and putting down the bowl, she lets out a burp. Giving Mike a sideways glance, she giggles and says, "Excuse me." Mike puts his elbows on the table. "Abby, we need to talk." Clearly noticing Mike's serious tone, Abby frowns. "I said, excuse me." Mike waves his hand. "Not about that," he leans forward. "You know what happened last night? That isn't normal, right?" Abby wipes the soup mustache from her face. "I'm not stupid, Mike." "No, you're not." Mike chews on his inside of his cheek. "How to word this?" "So the machines," Mike begins. "My friends," Abby corrected. "Sorry, your friends," Mike collected himself. "Are they, ghosts?" "Okay," Mike thought. "This is easier than expected." "Yeah," he said. Abby tilted her head and gave Mike a "way to catch on, Captain Obvious." "Look, of course," she said. "How else would they make the robots move?" Mike nodded. "So they're kids then, like you." Abby nodded and then shook her head. "They're younger," she clarified. "And they explained to you how they got the way they are now?" Mike asked. Abby drops her gaze to the empty soup bowl. Her shoulders hunch inward. "They don't like to talk about it." Abby lifts her head. She pushes her bowl toward Mike. "Can I have more soup?" Almost glad for the distraction, Mike took the bowl and jumped up. "Sure." Mike steps into the stove. A half empty pot of soup sat on one of the burners. He knew the soup was cold, so he turned on the burner on. He thought he was doing a very good job of acting like he was having a perfectly ordinary conversation with his 10-year-old sister. Doesn't everyone talk about ghosts at the dinner table? Mike's patient, calm demeanor wasn't as genuine as Abby probably thought. It was inside his glance was in overdrive. Mike had an agenda, but he thought he had to get around it some way or another. Mike picks up a wooden spoon and stirs the soup as it starts to steam a little. "You know, we used to have a brother, right?" He asked Abby without turning around. "Garrett." "I know we don't talk about him much." "Neither did Mom and Dad," Abby says. Mike blinks. He was surprised Abby remembered. She never spoke about their parents. She's only been like 3 when their mom and dad died. And their dad has left as well. "It was hard for them," Mike said. "Hard for me, too." Mike turns away from the stove and digs into his pocket. He pulls out the folded up drawing he tugged away earlier that day. Mike hands out the folded drawing to Abby. "Can you explain this to me?" Addie starts open the drawing on the table. She looks down at it. Mike didn't need to look at it again. He knew the drawings were of the black car and the blurred faced child. A child clutching an orange toy airplane. In the back window, Abby looks at Mike, her face tight. She presses her lips together and blinks several times. A classic. You got me. Look. Do you know what that is? Mike retook his seat and points at the drawing. Abby didn't speak. She studied the table. I'm not mad at you, Abs, Mike said. I just want to know. Another few seconds pass. Then Abby says, It's when Garrett was taken. Mike leans forward. Little fireworks of excitement were sizzling through his whole body. Who told you about this, Abby? More silence. Was it a little boy with blonde hair? Mike pushes. Abby nodded. I don't know his name, but he's one of your friends, Mike asked. Yes. And when did you meet him? Before Abby could answer, a spitting fizzle came from the stove. Mike looks over to see the soup boiling over. He lifts over and shifts the pot to a cold boiler. He turns off the stove. Mike turns back to Abby. She has picked up her napkin and it was tearing into little pieces. Clearly upset, Mike crouches down next to her and he puts the hand on the drawing. Abby, he said in the gentlest voice he could muster, this is very important. Did the blond boy ever say anything about the man who was driving the black car? Mike taps the car in the drawing. Please, think. You have to think quickly. That the moon couldn't peek out at all. The building lights were out, so a legion of walking dead or angry robots could have been lurking, and Mike could have seen them. Mike hustles to grab Abby's things in his own backpack. He locks up the car and rushes after his sister. You can't do that, Mike huffs, and he caught up to her. It's not safe. Abby was hopping from one foot to another in front of a locked door. She threw Mike a look that made him feel like a fuddled Betty. He gave and unlocked the door. As soon as the door was open, Abby brushed past and ran to the lobby. She scrambled toward the archway. I'm back, she called as she breezed into the dining room. The front door of Freddy's clinked shut. Mike, still not happy with Abby, crumbled with the giant robots or ghosts, dropped his backpack and Abby's things, and trotted around his sister. Abby, wait. Mike reaches the archway just in time to watch Abby wave at Vanessa, who stood near the walls of the children's drawings. Hey, Vanessa, Abby said. Vanessa, Mike noted, didn't look the least bit surprised to see Abby. Vanessa waves at his sister back as she darted toward the stage. When the animatronics were clustered as stiff as statues, Mike turned beneath his knees to talk to Vanessa in his impersonation to keep Abby safe. Hesitated in the middle of the dining room. He was therefore close enough to see Vanessa's reaction when animatronics stopped being statues and became furry robots, making awkward attempts to play like children. Abby scrambles up into the stage to greet her friends as Vanessa overstands the mic. Vanessa says nothing, and neither does he. They both just watch Abby and the animatronics in silence. Giggling, Abby pokes Chica in the middle of her bib and shouts, Tag, you're it. Chica opens her beak in a big grin and dodgers off behind the half-opened curtains. Abby and the others watch for a few seconds, then start chasing around the little chicken. It's like watching a bunch of Frankenstein's monsters at play, Mike thought. Vanessa's elbow Mike lightly. Hey, Mike. Mike keeps the gaze on the animatronics antics on the stage. Vanessa, he responds. They both continue looking straight ahead. Mike kept his face blank because he decided which of the baffling emotions was going to win. I guess you finally figured it out, Vanessa said. Huh, you think? Mike finally turns towards her. Vanessa was giving him a half smile, her gaze half empty. She could tell the feelings of more than anybody. She knew Abby told. You mean, did I figure out these ghost children were possessed by giant robot animals? No, my sister helped with that. Yeah, thanks so much for the heads up on that. Technically, Vanessa said, they're animatronics, not robots. A squeal of laughter turns them back towards the stage. Apparently, the tag game was over. Bonnie was giving Abby a piggyback ride. Mike really wanted to get Abby away from the giant robots. Every protector instinct in his body was screaming no, but Abby was clearly thrilled. Her, he turned back to Vanessa. What are you doing here? Vanessa appears her lips. I didn't say I checked on you, Mike. She nods nor toward Abby. So what's she doing here, Mike? Can't reach my babysitter. Vanessa half smile disappears. She replaced it with her cop stare, which was dialed up to 11. Hey, you guys, Abby called. We need help. Chapter 18. So, Mike, what are your plans for the evening? Mike thought. Well, I'm gonna build a fort with my sister, four fuzzy animatronics, and a cop. Mike shook his head at the absurdity of everything as he stood with the animatronics and Vanessa. They were clustered in a circle of a stage, and they were all looking down at Abby, who was scribbling on her drawing pad under the heading fort. She was sketching a rather weird structure. It needs to be big, Abby said, as her pencil skimmed over the paper, so we can all fit inside. Mike couldn't take it anymore. Wait, he said, hold on. I know this is very exciting and new, Abs, but I think we need to set some ground rules, okay? I mean, look at these things. He gestured at the behemoths that stood with him. These things are probably big and probably dangerous, so he turns toward Vanessa, who stood next to Bonnie. What do you think? Some of the tables over there are probably still strong enough to use for the fort, Vanessa said. Abby turns to look at the pile of furniture Mike has left in one side of the dining room. She smiles. Everyone, follow me. Abby jumps up and leans off the stage. As she ran toward the table of chairs piles, Mike meets Vanessa's gaze. She grins and shrugs. The animatronics are already stomping across the stage and following Abby. Why not? Mike thought as she whispers. Vanessa trails after them. For the next several minutes, Abby went from being the Abby the little girl to the Abby the construction foreman, waving her hands and pointing her fingers and standing with her fist on her hip while she waited for her orders to be fulfilled. Abby set the animatronics and Mike and Vanessa to work, tangling the pile of broken furniture. The animatronics were strong. Mike wasn't sure if the strength was robotic or ghostly, but he didn't think about it. Therefore, it didn't take much time for them to extract the several tables and chairs that were beaten up by the vandals. Once the materials were gathered, Abby directed Mike and Vanessa and the robots into a wacky looking fort side structure. The arrangement of tables and chairs would not have passed on any building code on the planet, but it was fun to build. Mike surprised himself when he began laughing along with Abby and Vanessa as they worked on with the animatronics. He even contributed his own ideas to the structure, into his own enjoyment of building things. He came up with a way to interfeed the chairs to help everything be more stable. Of course, the big robots didn't speak, but they were capable of acting goofy without his words. Freddy, for instance, staggered around the chair, balanced on his nose, and Foxy pretended to use the table as a pirate boat. The Fox animatronic ride around the ocean waves was so convincing that Mike found himself calling out, Avast, ye landlubbers! This earned him a big smile from Vanessa and a eruption of giggles from his sister. Mike couldn't honestly remember the last time he had such a good time. When they managed to stack the tables three high and get them linked together with a chair, well enough to be readily stable, Abby stepped back and said her minion's work. It needs to be higher, she. Mike, Vanessa, and the animatronics enhanced look. Mike knew he was getting used to the big metal beasts when he looked in their expressions. When no one moved, Abby said, Come on, guys, more tables. You heard the boss, Mike said to the animatronics. He tried to ignore the flutter of fear in his belly when they all turned and flashed their big teeth his way. Without the use of a crane, Mike didn't know how to stack more tables on the already tall structure, but he figured out his humor in Abby. Once they gathered the table, she sees it was a fully endeavored and she gave up. Or so he thought. Mike, however, has underestimated the animatronics, both their devastation to Abby and their teamwork. A few minutes later, he was watching in awe as Bonnie and Freddy, each griping together the legs of the table, rode on Chica and Foxy's shoulders. Thus, they managed to lift the table to the top of the stack. If they could get the balance in place, it would extend them out to the much taller fort, almost to the dining room ceiling. Mike took Abby's hand and drew her back away from the fort as they watched Bonnie and Freddy set the tables in place. Vanessa joins Mike and Abby, and the three of them let go into the table. As Bonnie and Freddy let go, the table and chair skyscraper wobbled like a giant, unsteady tower. Mike didn't wasn't sure it was going to come tumbling down, but it didn't. Abby broke free of Mike's grasp as she took the two triumphant fists above her head. Yes, she shouted. I'll be, Mike said, who knew his sister had talent. She might have a career ahead of her. Abby skipped toward the animatronics. You did it, she thrilled. Freddie and Bonnie, still on Chico's and Boxy's shoulder, gave each other a high five. Chico, getting in that spirit, threw her arms out in celebration. Oops, Mike thought. He saw the cascade effect in his mind before it unfolded. Chico's movement threw off the accumulation that holding Bonnie and Freddie aloof. Both the bunny and the bear lost their balance. Chica stumbling one way and Foxy the other, and then the animatronic blur all four metal and fur critters tumbled to the dining room floor. They hit the line, which made a whoomp that would have made the bone crackling if they hadn't been made of metal. The entire dining room rattled and rolled like it was caught in an earthquake. Mike and Vanessa had to widen their stance to stay upright, and Mike managed to grab Abby before the ripple effect of the construction knocked her off her feet. As soon as the tremper stopped, Abby shouted, "Guys!" She dashed forward to the unstempled animatronics. Vanessa was close on Abby's heels. Mike, concerned irrationally about the animatronics, hurried after Vanessa, even though he had no idea what he could do for the animatronics if they were hurt. Abby reached the heap of the fur and exposed metal. "Are you okay?" she asked. A few seconds of the squirming robotic limbs and more thuds on the floor, then four fuzzy thumbs up shot from the bundle. Mike couldn't help himself. He burst out laughing. Vanessa and Abby quickly joined them. After that, Mike pretty much forgot that animatronics were animatronics, so he just crawled inside of the crumbled fort. Mike had no problem lying on his back next to Foxy. He did prefer, however, the warmth of Vanessa, who was pressed up against his other side. Mike thought the complete fort was incredibly well done. After the animatronics have rivaled themselves, everyone has worked together to fill in the gaps of their chairs. The result was a structure that has remarkable symmetry and an equal number of chairs tucked between the legs of each table, and even the simplest of styles. Mike thought the combination of chrome tables and plastic chairs created a pretty cool design, and as soon as he thought, he snorted inwardly. What was happening to him? He just built a fort with possessed animatronics, and now he's getting all farcy. "I like it in here," Vanessa said. "Me too," Abby says. The animatronics were, of course, silent, but four animatronics reached out into the air again. The repeated gesture made Mike smile. "But I think," Abby says, "it's gonna rain soon." She sat up. "And my friends can't get wet because they're made of electricity." "Sounds like we need a roof," Vanessa says. Mike could who out his sister's critiques out of what they build. Vanessa's knuckles grasp Mike's. He's like the feel of her skin against his. "Mike," Vanessa says, "why don't we see what we can find?" Mike trails Vanessa down the hallway, dusty, musty, and even darker than the front hallway. The part of Freddy's wasn't his favorite. "What are we looking for exactly?" Mike asked. "Tablecloths. They used to keep them back here." Vanessa gestures down the hall for big events. Mike shot a look at Vanessa. She had an awful lot to know about the place. It was one thing he thought to know about the building's layout and history, but she knew about the tablecloths and where they kept. What was up with that? Mike's eyes went Vanessa as she steps out the hallway and opens a closed door. She disappears through the doorway. "Remind me how you know about stuff like that?" Mike calls after her. Silence came from behind the door. Mike frowned. The mystery of Vanessa was really starting to bug him. He clamped his teeth together and went after her. "Right," Mike thought. Remembering his tour of the building, he stepped into an even more mustier space. It was the main storage room, cluttered with stacks of collapsing boxes and decorated with cobwebs. The storage room was weird looking. The storage room was stuffed with several rows of roof to ceiling metal shelves. The shelves where everything else in the room appeared to have escaped vandal intention. All in the same way that has been last time he's been in here. Midway along the outmost row of dust laden shelving, a smaller door gaped open. It was the entrance to the boiler room. From the scraping and tapping within the room, Mike could tell Vanessa was in there. He stepped forward and looked through the door. Sure enough, Vanessa was off to the one side of the boiler, rummaging in his crushed cardboard box on the top of the leaning stacks of similar boxes. Mike wrinkled his nose. The boiler room smelled like rotten eggs. He knew the smell as came from the gas, which was the growth of the bacteria encouraged by the warm, moist space in the boiler. He hated that smell. Mike backs away from the boiler and left Vanessa to her tablecloth hunt. He moves farther into the storage room. Just to amuse himself, he started scanning the shelves. He hadn't looked around much when he's been here before. Mike reaches the end of one row, which contained nothing but empty shelves, or shelves stacked with pizza pans. He started to turn to go up the next row, which had a tangle of kitchen utensils and janitor supplies, but then his gaze lands on it. Mike's steps falter. He stops and stares, sitting on the ground, leaning against the gray cement blocks. On the storage room, back in the walls, about 3 feet tall, clearly this convention animatronic sat with it, her legs stretched out in front of her. with rosy cheeks like those of a balloon boy doll that Mike disliked intensely. The animatronic, which was more doll-like than robot-like, had red pigtails and a furry skirted dress. Beneath the smiling doll's face, the animatronic's dress was hinge open. The metal cavity was boarded by a gruesome cage-looking stuffed metal ribs. The contrast of the girly face and the shining spoke like possession was sinister. "What are you?" Mike asked. In spite of himself, Mike dropped to his heels and started extending a hand toward the looking tip of the ribs. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Vanessa's voice so startled Mike that he fell back into his butt. He looked up. She gestured at the metal ribs. "They call spring locks. A lot of the older animatronic models have them." Vanessa did the light blue to dark blue thing. Mike saw the familiar muscle twitch at her jawline. She took a step back and forward to the junk of the shelves. She pulls out a broom. The spring locks are designed to keep the animatronic parts locked in space, so a person can safely wear the suit. Vanessa steps forward in a flash and jabs the handle of the broom into the animatronic's chest cavity. A loud series of mechanical snaps clawing the swift, almost hip-hopping into the sounding rhythm. The ribs spring closed, the broom wood handle cracks in half. "They're unstable," Vanessa says unnecessarily. Mike knew his mouth was hanging open. He inched away from the animatronic, then looks at Vanessa. "People wear these?" Mike returned his gaze to the metal spring locks. "You have to be suicidal to, like I said, unstable." Mike looked back towards Vanessa. Her eyes had turned an even deeper blue, now almost black. Her chin was lifted and her eyes were set nearly closed. "Who is this woman?" Mike asked himself. He was almost afraid to move, almost afraid to even ask that she would. A muffled burst of rock music reached into the storage room. Mike's head whipped in that direction. "What now?" "It's just the show music," Vanessa said. "The animatronics are partly putting a performance for Abby." Vanessa's voice was flat. She wasn't smiling. But Mike stood and brushed himself off. "Yeah," I said. Then Abby's probably dancing with them. Her tone and his tone was light, and he smiled. He wanted to shift that mood, which was desolated. He could almost feel the waves of despondency radiating from Vanessa. "Anything else you want to let me on?" Mike asked. "Killer clowns, fire breathing dragons?" Vanessa's expressions didn't change. "I'm just curious," Mike went on, "since you seem to know a lot about this place." Vanessa turns away. That anger, Mike. He took a step towards her and raised his voice. "What if Abby came in here?" he shouted. "What if she found that thing?" He points at the animatronic, even though Vanessa was not looking at him. Vanessa spun around and towards Mike. Now her expression has changed. Her eyes were almost sparking with sparks. "You brought her, not me, Mike." Mike has no response for that. The coals of Vanessa's eyes were cool, just a little. What I still can't wrap my head around is why, honestly, why would you bring her? Mike thought about lying, but maybe he and Vanessa should stop about that. "I think the kids know who took my brother," he said. Vanessa's brows rose near to her hairline. Her anger was gone. Mike rushes to explain. "I think they are connected somehow. It's hard to explain, but every time I'm here, I feel closer somehow to Garrett. My dreams are more vivid, almost like I can change what happened." Vanessa fills in. "How does she know?" Mike asks himself. "How you ask them about this?" Vanessa proceeds. "One of them. He seems to speak for the others. The blond haired boy." He nodded. "I don't think he likes me very much, but he likes Abby." "And you figured he won't tell you? He'll tell her?" Mike shrugs. Vanessa puts her hand on her hip. She sneers at him. "How stupid can you be?" Mike bristles at both her posture and her expression, but he says evenly, "I'm sorry, Mike, you need to stop." Mike bristles turned into spikes. "Honestly," he drew her. "I don't really see how it's any of your business." Vanessa, as if transporting herself through the space between them, was in Mike's face. She grabbed her shirt collar. Her breath smelled sharp, even bitter. When she spoke up, she nearly growled, "I'm telling you to let this go." Mike could have been any more taken back as he's been nose to muzzle with a snarling tiger, and maybe his reaction was plastered to his face, because Vanessa once again moves in a flash. This time she whippled back and ended up 3 feet away from him. Vanessa seems to shrink into herself. Her face was bright red, and she didn't drop her gaze to the floor. Mike didn't take pity on her. Shame. Instead, he blurted out the question that wouldn't leave his head. "Who the hell are you?" Vanessa pulls in her shoulder. She didn't look up. Someone, she said in an almost little girl's voice, who's trying to help you. She raises her gaze. You idiot. The last time she said that was with a little more strength. But at least she didn't growl at him again, and apparently she was done. She strode away. Mike heard a rustling of papers, footsteps, and a slammed door. Okay. Chapter 19. When Mike burst into the dining room, clothes on Vanessa's wheels, he found Abby doing exactly what he predicted he was doing. She was dancing, sort of. Abby was up on the stage with the animatronics, and she was throwing her head back and forth like an Elvis impersonator. Bonnie was copying her. Vanessa's boots clapped feet lumber across the dining room floor. Mike looks her way, her head down, her shoulders still bow in across the room. Vanessa was going for the exit. Mike ran against her. Vanessa, wait. Mike cut up to Vanessa. He grabs her arm and yanks on it, forcing her to face him. Vanessa was stained with tears. As his fingers were getting burned, he let go of her. Talk to me, Mike said quickly. Vanessa wipes her face with the back of her hands. I'm trying. You won't listen. Mike grabs his head to hold in the that wanted to come out of his mouth. But he took a deep breath, then dropped his hands. I need to know what happened that day. Don't you get it? Finding the guy who took Garrett is the only thing that matters. Vanessa shakes her head. She opens her mouth, closes it, takes a deep breath, inhales. She looks to her right towards the children drawings. She frowns. Mike thought Vanessa looked like someone who badly wanted to convince something. But what? Vanessa's throat convulsed. She bites her lips, then she manages to say, You don't understand. Then explain it to me. Vanessa's gaze locks on Mike. She sets her jaw and takes a deep breath. She wasn't sure she was finally going to open up, and Vanessa seems to flip a switch. Every muscle in her body tense. Her eyes were focused past Mike, shot wide. What? Mike began. Vanessa took a halting step toward the stage. Mike starts to turn. Vanessa yells, No! Mike completely on his turn. On the stage, Abby was laughing. Bonnie was holding his guitar out to Abby. Abby tries to play the guitar. Abby encouragingly accepts it. She takes her handed the guitar and positions the guitar across her belly. Mike frowns in inner red alert. An alarm is going off. But why? Abby, don't! Vanessa screams. Vanessa was well past Mike now, sprinting towards the stage. Mike follows her. As he took his first step, Mike's memory banks found an urgent return on his inner screen. Red, bursting with bright colors, sparks against Bonnie's guitar. Abby, Mike shouts. He held out his hand. He could make like a magician and stop what was going to happen. Mike wasn't a magician. All he can do was watch as everything unfolds in snatches. Like Mike was seeing a series of still photographs. A grinding Abby stumbles a hand over the guitar fret. The grin disappears. Abby's eyes drawn together in confusion. A burst of blinding white light. Abby disappearance in distance. All Abby could see was a brightness of white. It was like light to her, blinding her. All Abby could hear was a high pitched ringing, like an alarm, only louder. It hurt in her ears. Abby rubbed her eyes. She pressed her hands to her ears, and then the white light was gone. But it's a little teensy, little stars in her eyes. Abby blinked. Mike faces and Vanessa and the faces of Abby's fans were inches from Abby. All the faces of Abby looked weird, distorted, and really scared. Abby shook her head like a dog, trying to stop the ringing in her ears. She blinked again. What happened? She asked Mike. Before Mike could answer, Vanessa leaned in and hugged Abby tight. Vanessa lets Abby go and leans back. Abby saw Vanessa's gaze flick to Mike. Mike was still staring at Abby. He looked guilty, like he's done something really bad. He still didn't answer Abby's question, but Vanessa did. It was an accident. Sweetheart, she said. Just a silly accident. Crickets chirped madly in the trees that surrounded Freddy's parking lot. Mike couldn't see either the trees or the crickets. The pizzeria exterior lights were out. The moon has left the night. So did the stars. The sky looked like one of the brown lights of the zoo so thick that Mike was finding it hard to believe what daytime felt like. Mike and Vanessa stood next to the cruiser. They both looked towards the back seat of his car, where Abby was curled up with the dolphin. Thank you, Mike said to Vanessa. Mike was leaving the pizzeria mid-shift. Vanessa was going to cover him. Vanessa shook off the gratitude. Just go home, Mike. Take care of your sister. Mike nodded, but he didn't move. He put his gaze from Abby and he put it on Vanessa. What is it that you're so afraid of? He asked. Vanessa shot him a look he couldn't read. In the storage room, he pressed. I saw your eyes. You were terrified. Vanessa's face instantly did the rock hard thing again. The car Vanessa was gone. Agent Vanessa grinned. Vanessa, brooding Vanessa. They were all back, she said. She stomped a foot. Do whatever you want with your life, Vanessa flunked at Mike. But if you ever bring Abby back here again, I'll shoot you. Vanessa squints her eyes and leans toward Mike. He didn't need her to pull a gun to convince him she might actually be serious. Vanessa storms back into Freddy's. Mike waited until the slam of the heavy metal door quieted the crickets for an instant. As the crickets chirped back into gear, Mike got in his car. She looks really mad, Abby says from the back seat. She's fine? Why does everyone always look at you that way? Mike turns back into the key into the engine. The engine sputters. Everything is fine, Mike says. Everything was not fine. Mike sat in the kitchen table and watches the first hint of dawn begin sneaking towards his window. From the intensity of the early lights, Mike concluded that the clouds have hid the moon during the night, has moved off. Mike wishes his own personal clouds move on, but they appear to be stuck over his head with superglue. Not even Mike could push-ups have aged to clear stormy skies. The sound of Abby's snores, a little louder than usual, reached him from her room. He couldn't believe what he was going to do. But what choices does he have? Vanessa was right. He couldn't take Abby back to Freddy's. Sighing and feeling like he was going to throw up, Mike lifts his phone and he punches in a number. As soon as he heard the clicks on the other end of the line, Mike spoke. He had to wild up and still had the stomach for it. Hey, it's Mike, he said. I need your help. As soon as he said them, he immediately regretted his words. 2 hours later, Nick still hated the choice he made, but he was trying to make the best of it. The sun was full out for now. He entered into the kitchen and tried to convince Mike he was doing the right thing. Checking the pancakes on the griddle, Mike started up some bacon in a cast iron skillet. The sweet and savory smell came together and attempted to join with the sun all is well message. Mike wasn't buying it, keeping his back to his kitchen table because he couldn't look at what he's done. He kept cooking anyways. He finished everything and stuck it into the oven to keep it warm. Then he took a deep breath and went to wake up Abby. Abby opened her eyes and saw her brother sitting at the edge of her bed. Yawning, she grinned at him. Then she noticed what her nose was telling her. Is that bacon? She asked. Cool. They didn't usually have bacon, and Abby loved bacon. Why don't you get dressed and come to the kitchen when you're ready? Mike said. There's something we need to talk about. Abby frowned. Uh-oh, was he bribing her with bacon? She shrugged. So what? It was bacon. Mike left the room and Abby jumped out of her bed. Popping into the bathroom, she did all the usual morning stuff. Then she went back in her room dressed in her overalls with a gold shirt because she was sure it was going to be a gold star day. Then she skipped down the halls to get her bacon. I'm ready for it. Abby stopped mid skip when she saw who was sitting at the kitchen table. The bacon was a bribe, not a big enough one. That's my favorite little girl, Abby, Aunt Jane said. Abby tried to make her aunt, with her stupid short hair and her dumb old pale blue pantsuit, disappeared with laser eyes. Abby wrinkled her nose, choking on her aunt's stupid grapefruit perfume. Abby comes it down, Mike said. Abby turned the laser eyes on Mike, but she couldn't hold the laser. Her hate turned to hurt. What did you do? She asked her brother. Abby couldn't tell Mike knew she was upset, but he pretended he didn't. Come sit down, he said again. We can talk. Abby shook her head. No way. She started retreating from the kitchen, backing down the halls. I know what you're thinking, Mike said. I promise you you're wrong. Please, Abby, just let's talk. Abby looks at her aunt, then she returns her gaze to Mike. His face looks like he was trying to eat a pot of Brussels sprouts. No, his face looks like he couldn't stand to be him. I hate you, Abby says to him. Abby turns and ran back to her room. As she went in and slams the door, she heard her aunt say, I think that went well. Putting her head back into the door, Abby closes her eyes and clutches her hair in both hands. She lets out a cross between a howl and a war. Tears fall over her eyes and forces them open. She couldn't stop the tears from pouring down her eyes. She rubs them away as fast as they flow. Abby's gaze lands on her desk and her drawings. She stomps towards her desk and throws them in a chair. She opens the desk drawer. Abby tugs them in and finds the biggest, blackest markers she had. Then she reaches for the stack of her most recent drawing and draws over them. Abby starts to black out every image of her brother she can find. Mike couldn't look at his aunt as he grabs the keys and pulls out his coat. She reminds me of you, Jane said. Always with the temper. Mike shot and he looked at Jane, figuring out she was trying to pick a fight. He was surprised when he found out her looking at him with a softer than normal expression. If Mike hadn't known any better, he might have believed she was looking at him with fondness. Nah. When she comes down, Mike said, tell her I'm sorry and I'll be back soon. When is soon exactly? You've been a little fuzzy with the details. There was the snarky Aunt Jane Mike knew. And in love. Soon, Mike said. Aunt Jane shoos Mike away. Go then. Mike turns toward the door. But Mike, Jane said to his back, there's a larger conversation that still needs to happen here. And when you do get back, you and I are going to need to talk. She picks up a piece of bacon and nibbles on it. The image of the vulture chewing on the curry flashed towards Mike's mind. He practically ran away from his own house. Clutching the white bag that the pharmacy had, puts Mike's refilled prescription in. Mike stares towards Freddy's entrance door. The elderly drug mentor's advice. You know what works for me? A warm glass of milk and caramel and honey replaced in Mike's head as he went. Right back at you, Mike thought now. A crow let out a long cackle. Mike looked up into the trees around Freddy's. He couldn't find the crow, but he gazed down on the wood cutout Freddy Fazbear head. The bear grinned seems to be cheering on Mike. Stuff it, Mike said. He let himself into the pizzeria and went directly to the office. There, Mike wasted no time. He popped in the bear chair, sat on his cassette player, and dried swallowed three of the white pills from the bottle. He pulled from the white bag. He looked into the gaze on the poster opposite the desk, maybe because he was so determined, or maybe because he hadn't slept well in days. The effect of Mike's routine was immediately eight. His vision blurred as he listened to the sound of the wind in the trees coming from the casket. He lid fluttered close. Sunlight is warm on Mike's shoulder. As he walks forward, the breeze picks up the locks of his hair. It tickles his moment. Mike hears laughter as he looks towards it. Stunned, he stares at his family, all gathered by the picnic table. Mike's mom is setting the table for lunch. His dad is standing next to her, and he's spinning an overjoyed Garrett around like a spiraling airplane. Garrett's laughter fills the campsite. All right, Mike's mom says. Enough game, you two. Mike's mouth hangs open as he watches his dad swoop toward the picnic table with Garrett. Emergency landing, Mike's dad shouts. His dad makes a whooshing sound as he sweeps Garrett's like an eagle. Mike's dad plunks the boy into the table with a flourish tone. Then Mike's dad leans in towards Mike. Hey, buddy, Mike's dad calls out. Don't just stand there, his mom says to Mike. Come on, dig in. Mike's parents settle at the table benches. Garrett climbs off with the tabletops and joins them. Then the boy turns and gives Mike the biggest, most adorable, happy kid smile Mike has ever seen. Mike's eyes are in tears. His mom looks his way. Sweetie, what's wrong? Mike wipes his eyes. Clear his throat. This isn't real. He stumbled back from the picnic table. This isn't how it happened. He shakes his head. This isn't real. Mike's parents and Garrett exchange confused glances. But it could be. The voice is coming from behind Mike. It's a child's voice. Mike turns to find the blond boy and the other four children standing behind him. He shakes his head again, this time more venturingly. He bites his lips. His hands are clenched into his fist. What is this? Mike asked the blond boy. This isn't what I asked for. The blond boy looks into his head. No, he said, but it's what you wanted. More head shaking from Mike. He's trying to erase the entire scene by rejecting it. I want to find Mike begins. You're lying, the blond boy interrupts. Mike looks into the ground. You want to save Garrett, the boy says. That's why you're really here? Mike tries to another head shake, but a feeble one. You want to change what happened, the boy says. You want to go back. Mike throws up a handshake and to shield himself from the boy's words. That's not possible, he says. He's gone. They all are. Really? The boy points past Mike. Even though he doesn't want to, Mike turns around and looks at his family. They're staring at him with concern and compassion and hope. Garrett scrambles off with a wooden bench and dashes towards Mike, who drops to his knees with his eyes to his little brother. You can have this dream every night, the blond boy says. You can be together again, like before. The boy's voice dropped to a near whisper. You can change what happened. Mike's head shakes as he turns into a tentative nod, his tears erased from his eyes. Mike looks at the blond boy. How? You said we can have whatever we wanted? The blond boy says it's only fair. He steps up close to Mike and leans in. Mike expected to feel the boy's warmth, but the chilling air touches Mike's ear as the boy says in a gentle whisper, "We want Abby." Mike wipes his tears, his face twisted. He struggles to grasp what's going on. Mike's eyes widen. He gets it now. Abby? He whispers. Garrett clutches Mike's hands. They love her, Mike, Garrett says, and she loves them. Mike looks at Garrett. All run from Mike's nostrils. Joining his tears, he stiffs. It's for the best, buddy, but Mike's dad calls from the picnic table. It really is. Mike looks over his dad, who smiles reassuringly. Even as ragged as he is, Mike can't help but return the smile. Mike's mom chimes in. You've seen her with them. You've seen how happy she is. Mike looks over at his mom. She's tearing up too. Doesn't she deserve a real family? His mom asks as she gets up and comes over to kneel next to Mike. She uses her thumb to wipe the tears off his cheeks. Mike tenderly nods and becoming more assured. It's time to let her go, sweetie, his mom says. You were never the right person to take care of her. Now Mike nod is sympathetic. He's not nodding because he wants to believe her. He does believe her. He agrees with what he's hearing. Mike looks from his mom to his dad to Garrett. His conviction solidifies. Okay, Mike says. He nods one last time. Yes. The blond boy lifts one side of his mouth to smile, a satisfying smile. Mike looks again at his brother. His gaze lands on top of the flop of his hair that's absorbing Garrett's eyes. Mike reaches out to the brush of the lock of the hair back. His hands stop mid motion. The sun's spotlight suddenly glares in Mike's eyes, and he feels its heat captivating him on the capsite and into the memory. Mike's vision turns inward. He sees his sleeping sister in his mind. He knows he's sitting on the side of her bed. He sees his hand reach out and brushes a lock of her hair up her face. He's in a memory, he realizes, but then the memory becomes something else. It becomes more of a vision, something Mike wants to experience instead of something he experienced in the past. In Mike's mind, Abby's eyes open. She smiles at him. You're home, she said. In his mind, Mike smiles at his sister. I'm home, he said. The picture in Mike's mind disintegrates. He's back at the campsite. The sun disappears behind a cloud in the instant shade. Mike stares at Garrett. Mike realizes his hand is still looking at the locks of Garrett's hands. Mike pulls his hand back. With that motion, it seems like the veil drops away. Garrett's face is starting to pale, too pale, and his eyes are wrong. The adorable Garrettness is gone from Garrett's eyes. Mike's brother's eyes have turned into deep wells of hollowness. Mike staggers to his feet. Wait, this isn't. He looks at his parents. They are too pale as well. They too have bottomless eyes. Mike returns to his head shaking. This is wrong, he said. I'm sorry, I don't want. You hear me? I don't want this. Mike spins to confront the blond boy, but the boy and the other children are gone. Mike scans the campsite and can't find him. He turns back to his family also gone, vanished. Mike is completely alone. Mike hears the tree branches swish. The wind picks up and a creak of branches. Though the sound of the windshield in the trees, a chorus of whispers start to build in volume. The content of the whispers in the distance at first is just a cessation of white noise, but then the whispers begin to separate into something clear. Abby, the whispers say. Mike turned in a circle, and it's the children. He realizes the voices are taunting him. He turns and turns, trying to find the kids. Listen to me, Mike shouts. You stay away from her. The whispers are louder now. Abby, Abby, Abby. Mike screams. Stay away from my sister. The whispers scream louder and louder and are replaced by giggles. Then the rush of footsteps. Mike rolls toward the sound. All he sees is a blur of motion. And then a paper hook arcs toward him. A bolt of heat scores into his chest. Gasping, Mike throws up a hand towards his chest. Before he can get in there, he sees another blur. This time it's the top hat. The boy wearing it rakes his claws against Mike's back. Mike cries over and flounders in a circle. He doesn't see anything but trees. A flutter of motion out of Mike's range of vision perceives another lava flow of pain. This one causes Mike to throw in his left cuff. Mike lets go out from under him. He tries to curl into a ball, but the scourge pain stops him. The strike lands too fast for him to defend himself. His clothes are being shredded. Mike falls back, lying prone to the dirt above him. The wind picks up. He hears a whirl low and soft. Mike looks up into the trees. His vision is hazy. The tone of the whirling circle is no longer like a wind. It sounds mechanical. Mike's lid flutters. He's giving into the pain, but when the grinding metal of the metal sounds get even closer, his eyes are bugged wide open. All right, how much we got? We might stop by like chapter. We're almost done. We might stop by like chapter. Let's see. Uh, if we do, might stop by like 321. We're gonna start by chapter 27. Chapter 20. The mechanical third was defending now, almost as long as helicopters rotored. Vroom, vroom, vroom. The sound demanded Mike return to full cautiousness. Mike tried to get his eyes to zero in on whatever was causing the head splitting sound. His eyes weren't fully cooperating, but they were giving glimpses. Mike struggled to process what he was seeing. His head was pounding because the visuals snatched were coming at him like they were being hit with a strobe light. Mike saw a robotic arm suspended above his head, a bare mask peeled open, held by the arm, honed bit of metal inside the mask, like miniature knives in constant motion. Mike's brain brought his sight completely back online, and Mike put it together. He was lying on his back on a head metal surface, a reclining chair. He was looking at the inside of a robotic mask full of shape. The mask was coming toward his face. Mike yelped and tried to get up. Then he realizes that he was bound to the chair. Steel bands were clamped towards him in his wrist. A heavy leather strap was clutched towards his chest. The metal juggernaut started to descend towards Mike's face. He did the only thing he could do. He brought every muscle he had into play and sent him into motion. He squirmed and twisted and wriggled. He kicked his legs and joints. He bottled up and down the side to side. Mike knew, of course, his efforts was going to fail. He wasn't strong enough to break above the metal churning. Mike heard a crack and discerning pick and crack. He knew that sound. A boat has given away. Mike felt his arms were given away of the chair's arms detached. His gaze still on the mask. Mike jerked on his arm without much hope. To Mike's astonishment, the metal clamps exchanged from Mike's wrist. His arms were free, but that wasn't enough. The mask was getting closer now, slowly and slowly, lower and lower. Sharp metal, soft space, not a good combination. Mike sensed his fingers in search of something, anything, on the side of the chair that could help him get free. He ran his fingers on a metal truss that between sharp gaps, and then Mike's fingers stopped on something flat and round that kind of controlled the buttons. Mike strained it to see if his hands could get a quarter side green light. He didn't hesitate, and he pushed the green button, and eureka! The other hand wrist was uncoupled. The mask was not just on inches from Mike's nose. It was so close that the burning or rotating cycling metal was blowing his hair. Furious with the crucial need to move, Mike fumbled with the leather chest strap. Maybe because he got luckier, maybe because necessarily is the matter of getting the hell out of Dodge. Mike managed to clip the strap of the other side of the chair. His escape couldn't have been come any later. The blazing metal grasped the side of his forehead as he turns downward. Mike drops to the floor. Metal on metal screeches told him the mask, aka Buzzsaw, was grinding into the chair. Fireflies of hot sparks scarred the little hair of Mike's arms as he rolls away from the chair. All of Mike's muscles demand a break. He flops into globs of exhaustion. The continuous sparks of sprays and his understanding of his full strength got Mike back in motion. He tries to stand. Fiercely pain in Mike's calf sends him into a balance. He topples backwards into a metal and sticky crusty fur. Mike scuttles away from what was grabbing him. His gaze shot widely. He saw a litter of fatal fur covered animatronic characters. It's just costumes, Mike told himself. Again, he tried to stand, this time, ready for the pain. He made it. But he wavered at his feet. He heard a particular familiar hop hop beat of snaps. Looking down, he waved the costume open. Mike squandered and blundered backwards. His hand whippled to his nose and mouth as the sick stench of rotting corpses hit him. Now no longer thinking about running because his brain was now overwhelmed by what was he was seeing and smelling. Mike's stomach threatened to have gaze as the mutilated remains of three men and Max. Mike gagged as he was looking at poor Max's body. It was severed in two. No, not severed. It looked like something has bitten her in half in the waist. Her upper body laid back against one of two men, and her lower body was draped against her stomach. Mike, his hand over his mouth, quickly shifting his gaze to her face. Her eyes and mouth were wide open, in a peer of terror. "Oh, Max," Mike whispered. Mike leave his eyes away from her. When he did, he saw that the faces of one of the men had been chewed all the way into the man's brain. Mike quickly moved his gaze to the other two men. One was older and one was younger. Mike sucked in his breath. He recognized the younger man. It was Jeff, Max's brother. Jeff and the older guy looked like they'd been run through a meat slicer. But no, the cuts were straight. They were curved, like the wounds you get from a pirate hook. The last, though, finally wounded Mike. He turned away from the permanent cadavers and limped past the still sparkling Maxon chair. He staggered toward the door. At the room code, Mike paused. All the way from the down the main hallway, the lights were shriggling on and off and off. The rhythm wasn't even though it was chaotic, as if the lights were being manipulated by someone too enraged to stay in control. Mike squinted to see the distorting flashes of light and dark. It was too hard to know for sure, but the hallway appeared to be empty. Mike rode into the halls, his feet fumbling as if he never properly learned to walk. Mike zigging and zagged his way towards the lobby. It was if he could get in there, he could get out of the building, meet salvation. Mike tried to pick up the pace. His feet shoveled faster, just a few feet from the lobby now. From behind Mike, a crash boomed after him. A ward joined from the crash. They partnered in their pursuits. Mike didn't bother to look back. He caught out every ounce of strength he had, and he stepped forward into the gas. Managing to break out and gallop, he spilled into the lobby. He threw himself towards the double doors, but when Mike hit the doors, they wouldn't open. They were locked in. A new sound joined the clashing and warring. No, not a sound. A voice. A singing voice. Dum 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 dum. The lights were now going bonkers. They were winking in and out so fast it was impossible for Mike to see what was coming towards him. But something was, something big, something fast. Mike summoned the last bit of his perseverance. He pounded on the heavy metal doors. Sensing rather, something screamed and fell into total eclipse of any light he has ever seen or hoped to see. Abby, curled up in her bed, hugged the dolphin tighter than she ever did. She wasn't tight enough, though. Outside Abby's window, the sun was deep, red ball hovering just above the hills in the distance. Soon it would slip out of sight. Abby thought the ball looked like a big drop of blood, like the sky was ever going to need to be hurt or need a bandage. Of course, Abby knew the sky wasn't hurt, she was hurt. But she wasn't hurt in the way that a bandage would help. A bandage couldn't fix the stuffed nose or the stinging eyes that hours of crying has left her with. And it couldn't fix the fact that her happiness she's been feeling ever since she's been reunited with her friends at Freddy's has been ripped away. Abby's happy was gone. That's why she kept hugging to the dolphin tighter and tighter. Hanging on to something familiar Abby loved, and who loved her, was the only thing she could stop from her tears. Maybe she hoped it hadn't worked yet. A knock on the door caused Abby to smush the dolphin even more. Abby put her face in her dolphin's blue fur. "Abby, sweetheart," her Aunt Jane called toward the door. Abby let go of the dolphin with one arm and pulled her blanket over herself. Even though the blanket in the door, she could hear the TV in the living room. She heard it for hours, that stupid fake laughter coming from the TV. Told Abby that her Aunt Jane was watching old-timey sitcoms. "You can't stay in there forever, kiddo," Aunt Jane called. "Leave me alone," Abby shouted, sniffing again. Jane sighed clearly toward the door. "Suit yourself," she said. Abby could tell her aunt was annoyed, but who cares, she said, in satisfaction as the tap 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 of the dump heels her aunt was always wearing retreated from her door. Jane gave Abby the closed door a long, staring look. Spoiled brat. The obnoxious little twirl wouldn't be acting like that much longer, Jane thought, as she strode back into her nephew's ratty, pathetic living room. Ha! Living room. How can anyone possibly live in such squalor? Jane sure couldn't. But she couldn't tolerate it for now. Jane had to keep her eyes on the end goal. That's why she was here, pretending to help. Oh, and she was helping, all right, helping herself. Once Abby was in Jane's custody, Jane would be one step closer to being in control of the big, fat trust fund that she never would have had if Abby was in there in the first place. Why Jane's father has left his money to his granddaughter instead of his daughter was beyond Jane. She understood why he hadn't left it to Jane's brother. For one thing, he disappeared off the face of the earth after he left his family. For another, he was an idiot. He never should have married such a weak woman. Curling his lips at the couch sagging cushions, Jane plopped into one of them. Wrinkling to try to create a comforting position, she reached for the TV remote and made yet another attempt to find something decent to watch on the television. Landing on a yet another sitcom, Jane hurled on the old rolling TV. Crappy TV, must be the feedback, she thought. She turned up the volume so she could hear what was being said. Instead of hearing the static, Jane smoothed through the crease of her pants. I'm gonna have this a pantsuit dry clean, she thought. Who knew what kind of parasites were living in the grunty sofa cushion? A funny line on the TV pulled a laugh from Jane. She shook her head at the antics of the screen, and Jane stopped mid-head shake. What was that? She thought. She thought she'd look at the glimpse of the kitchen. Was Mike finally home? Jane turned and opened her mouth, and preparing the scolding that her nephew deserved her, expecting her to cool her jets in. Jane dropped the remote, half in the shadows and half in the glitter that smeared of the dust lights coming through the kitchen window. A giant bear stood next to Mike's fridge. It was just a few feet from Jane, and it was staring at her with radiant white eyes. Jane closed her eyes. I'm hallucinating, she thought. Just a little time in the drag of Mike's life. And she was already losing her. Jane opens her eyes again. No way. The bear was still there, and it was taking a step towards her. Still under her blanket, still hugging the dolphin, and crying harder now. Abby went rigid when a big twig shook the door so hard that Abby's bed juggled beneath her. Abby once again took up the blanket and sat up. What was that? She whispered to the dolphin. The dolphin had no answer, but he was there for support when Abby got out of the bed and hurried towards the door. Laying her ear against the pinwood, she listened. She heard nothing except the TV. Since Abby has burrowed under the covers, the red ball in the sky has disappeared. Now she sheered outlined the top of the hills. Abby could see in the distance toward the window. Night will be here very soon. Aunt Jane, Abby called. Abby didn't really want Aunt Jane, but she didn't feel like ignoring the big bang. The only response Abby got from was more of that fakey fake laughter from the TV. Abby frowned. She looked back towards her bed. Maybe she should just get to bed. Abby listens to the door again. No, she knew she hadn't knows what had made that big sound. She had to find out somehow. Abby reaches for the doorknob, but then hesitates. She backtracks to her desk. She could get a drawing pad and some pencils. Abby felt better when she had the pad and her pencils in her overalls, so she stuffs both of them into place. A bit more confident, Abby returns to her door and opens it. She peeks out the hallway, then hesitantly walks down towards the kitchen. It was empty, so Abby looks toward the living room where Freddy? Abby came back to her. The animatronic bear separates itself from a blobby shadow near the end of the sofa. As soon as it did, Abby could see she wasn't looking at Freddy. The bear looked like Freddy in every way except for one obvious difference. His fur wasn't brown, it was golden. The gold was almost the color of the shirt Abby was still wearing, with the maroon overalls she put on the morning. A golden Freddy. Wow, Abby said. She no longer cared about the miserable hours she'd gone through. Her eyes stopped stinging. She couldn't breathe towards her nose again. Who are Abby stopped mid question when a little boy with tonsil blonde hairs, the same color as the big robotic bear fur, magically came out of the robot. Not Freddy, the blonde boy said. Abby stared in beneath in awe. He looked like just like the ordinary boy. Not exactly. The boy was kind of sparkly, and Abby could see towards him, just a little wee bit. Abby thought the boy looked like the way an angel might look like. Abby gave the fairy tale like boy a big smile. You came for me? She asked. The boy nodded. Everybody's waiting. It's time to go play. Ivy squealed and clapped her hands. The blond boy gave her a smile and then dissolved into the shimmerness that went back into Golden Freddy. The big bear gestured at Abby to follow him as he took a giant step towards the front door of the house. Abby looked down at the dolphin. She didn't want to risk losing him while she was playing with the others, so she set the dolphin on the kitchen table. As she did, she caught a glimpse of the light blue in the living room. Abby turned on the floor, gently behind the end of the sofa. The hem of Aunt Jane's pants were visible. Her aunt's feet, still in her high heels, stuck out in the pants. The heels seemed to be lined in the pool of something. Ketchup, maybe? Has her aunt spilled ketchup behind the sofa? Silly Jane. Golden Freddy said. The animatronic spoke in the little boy's voice. She fell asleep. Abby started to speak up for herself. Why her aunt would sleep on the floor and spill ketchup? But then she shrugged. She didn't care what her aunt did. She turns and follows Golden Freddy out the front door, closing it behind her. Golden Freddy trembles into the little porch. Abby pauses as she listens to his heavy footsteps. All the sun red were gone. It was full on night now. A third of the moon was hovering on the concrete side, stream across the streets, and the moonlight made the bear fur seem like it was about to catch fire. It looked really cool. Abby gazed up and down of the street. How do we get to Freddy's? She asked. Golden Freddy Freddy looked into his head. One of the big white eyes blinked shut and then opened once again in a slow motion wink. His teeth flashed in the moonlight as he gave Abby a wide smile. The smile was more creepy jack-o'-lantern than a warm smile and friendly. But Golden Freddy couldn't help that. Abby knew that animatronics couldn't move and make expression like normal kids, so that was okay. Abby has never ridden in a taxi before, so she got a fizzle bit of excitement when she opened the shiny yellow back door and got into it. Taking a seat, she grinned at the fun old country music playing on the radio. She looked at the back of the driver's head. All Abby could see was the driver's headrest was curly brown hair sticking on from the dirty baseball cap that looked like it has been worn for thousands of days. The cap was bopping to the twinkling music. Abby shifted her gaze to the rearview mirror, and she saw crinkled green eyes looking back at her. The driver turns his head and notices a toothpick sticking out between lips, extension into a smiley, friendly smile. The driver faces front again and asks, "Where to, little lady?" As Abby opens her mouth to answer the question, the other backseat door opens. The taxi settles low, really low, as Golden Freddy squeezes himself into towards the door and manages to sit next to Abby. The hell? The driver spins around his seat so much that he hits his head on the roof of the taxi. He spits out his toothpick and lets out a shriek. Abby smiles, but she didn't blame the driver for his reaction. She knew adults wouldn't understand. The driver's mouth hung open as he stares at Golden Freddy. Golden Freddy gives the driver one of the big grins. The driver turns around and Farley looks at Abby. She smiles at him sweetly. The driver shook his head, then faces at the front of the taxi again. Not cool, man. Not cool, he says. Abby disagrees. She thought riding in a taxi with Golden Freddy was pretty cool. The mud means something Abby couldn't make out. The driver took in a loud breath, then he puts the car in gear. He went to We want to go to the old Freddy's Pizzeria again, please, Abby said. The driver eyed Abby in the rearview mirror. He shook his head. Why do I always get the weirdos? He asked. Alrighty. Chapter 21. We're gonna start by like chapter 27, alright? Mike opens his eyes, and the first thing he saw was an orb of bright lights above his head. The light was too bright to be in Freddy's, or was it? The next thing Mike noticed was that he was lying on metal again, not that chair again. Mike puts his hands on the cold, flat surface. He tries to put himself off it. Then was he noticing the third thing? His whole body was hurt. Why did it? He levered up enough to look around at himself. He frowned at what he saw. Mike wasn't in the chair of Freddy's. He was lying on a stainless steel table. His shirt was gone and his chest was wrapped rolled up in heavy bandages. Beyond his chest, Mike could see his pants had been cut away from his lower leg. The legs were wrapped up in bandages too. He gritted his teeth and he swung his legs off the metal table. Careful, a woman said. No, not just a woman. It was Vanessa. Mike tracked the direction of the voice, and he found Vanessa, ununiformed, standing in a folding metal chair about 6 feet away from him. The chair was tucked into the corner of the room, filled with a white metal glass floor cabinets, definitely not Freddy's. The room's walls were painted stark white, and the floor was a gleamy royal blue. Everything Mike saw was fresh and sanitary. I got the bleeding to stop, but you're probably gonna need stitches, Vanessa said. Mike looked at the bandages again. Where are we? Police? Supply outposts? And air station? I brought you here from Freddy's. You were badly hurt. A memory of descent open mask flashed towards Mike's head. They tried to kill me. When Mike looks at Vanessa, she drops her head and his eyes got tucked into pleat of darkness cast by the cabinet next to her. But I'm guessing you already knew that, Mike said. Vanessa says nothing. Mike leans forward. Max, her brother, the other men. Did you know about them too? Vanessa lifts her head, and her eyes came out of the shadows. She looks at Mike and saw her eyes were filled with tears. You didn't know, Mike said. He really hoped that she didn't. It's complicated, Vanessa says. Complicated? You mean more complicated than a bunch of possessed robots murdering innocent people? Those people, trash Freddy's, Vanessa shouted. They weren't innocent. Well, Abby is, Mike said. As Vanessa buried her face in her hands, Mike didn't bother to say that even vandals didn't deserve to have their face gnawed off, or their bodies chewed in half. Why Max, Mike thought. Why had she been part of that? He shook his head. It didn't matter. Abby was the only thing that mattered right now. You watched her play with those things, Mike said to Vanessa, bowed head. His voice rose. You knew what they were capable of, and you didn't say anything. Mike shoved himself off the table. He took a weak step forward. He scanned the room. Where are my things? I need to go, now. Vanessa dropped her hands. When she looked up at Mike, her face was striped by glistening tears tracks. Mike, Abby is in danger. Mike spotted his shirt lying on the stainless steel counter, under a row of cabinets on the far side of the room. The shirt was bloody and it was torn, but it was a shirt. He limps towards it. Mike. He stops and turns towards Vanessa. Vanessa puts her hands up her heels. Slow down. Take a breath. She switched towards the stern cop voice, and her face was flipped from the concrete to the auditorium. Tell me what happened. Mike suddenly couldn't move. The memory of his dreams, of everything he's done, came back to rushing back and haunt him. It was turned to a drop his head. If only he could take it all back. It took a superhuman effort to open his mouth and confess what he's done. As he did, he couldn't face Vanessa. He talked to the floor. In my dream, Mike began. He took a deep breath and tried again. They wanted Abby, and I gave her to him. He pressed it to his palm against the side of his head. It was a terrible mistake, and when I tried to fix it, he pounded the hilt of his hand against his temple. Mike looks at Vanessa. What do they want with my sister? Several long seconds passed. Mike thought Vanessa wasn't going to answer, and when she did, he wished she didn't. They want to make her like them, Vanessa said. The pretty yellow taxi drove away. Abby waved to the driver, but he didn't wave back. He didn't even look at her. Abby shrugs. She gives the Golden Freddy, her friend. Golden Freddy held out his big furry hand. Abby grins and took it. They swung their hand together as they walked towards the entrance of Freddy's. Golden Freddy's heavy step crackled thump over the crumbly concrete sidewalk. Abby felt like she might burst into excitement. She was so excited. Golden Freddy pushes the metal door open. He lets go of Abby's hand and motions for her to go into the front of her. He was such a gentleman. Abby skips into the pizzeria lobby. Behind her, the doors clank shut. Abby turns around to see Golden Freddy was gone. Abby frowns. She turns in full circle. Where did you go? Abby looks at the door. Has he left? No. She has heard his footsteps. She turns toward the archway. She heard his footsteps, no matter which way he's gone. Abby shrugs. She has seen some of Golden Freddy's magic. He must have used that to disappear. Maybe he was with the others. Abby stares across the lobby, heading towards the dining room. She couldn't wait to see Freddy's, original Freddy's, and the others. The scuffed tap of Abby's footsteps seemed to bounce off the dining room walls. As she walks into the room, she looks towards the stages. The curtains were drawn back, but the stages were empty. Abby frowns and looks around. Hello? Most of the dining rooms were so dim that Abby could barely see it. Instead of the usual half bulbs that were lit in the room, just one single floodlight came from the stage. It stretched out like a fat yellow ghostly finger, which pointed across the room at the walls of the children's drawings. Freddy? Abby called. Chica? Anyone? Abby called, circled around the room, and returned to her. No one answered them. Looking at the lighted finger, Abby gazed toward the front of it. What was the point of the drawings? Curious, Abby walked over to the wall. She looked up. Abby has noticed drawings before. It was impossible to miss them. The curled, brittle paper covered nearly one whole wall of the dining room, and the air current in the room were always tickling the drawings, which made them crackle. Abby had never looked at the drawings before, though. Now she did. Drawn by kids younger than Abby, the pictures were mostly stick figures, but it was possible to tell what the figures were supposed to be. Abby could see in the images kids were playing, families were eating, animatronics were performing. The pale circle, the lights at the end of the yellow ghost finger, was centered in the middle of the drawings, and in the center of the circle, one drawing stood out. Abby stepped into over it. The drawing was of a yellow rabbit, which was holding hands with five smiling children. Even though they were circumly drawn, Abby recognized the children. They were her friends. After she dropped her bomb, Vanessa has left her chair and started pacing back and forth the cabinets. Mike, still stunned, could only watch her in silence. Vanessa stops pacing, standing with her back to Mike. She begins to talk. Cop Vanessa was gone again. This was her gentle side of Vanessa. She spoke softly. They had the strain to hear her. In the 80s, she began, when those children went missing, the police searched Freddy's from top to bottom. Every square inch was accounted for, but they never found them. Something about Vanessa's voices, her words, turned Mike's shame on his head. Anger swelled up from his bandage's chest. He clapped his teeth together and clenches his fists. The man who took them, Vanessa went on. He was a very bad man, a very cruel man. Mike watches Vanessa reach into his pocket of her uniform pants. She took out a full piece of paper. He was also a very clever man, she said. He knew the parents would scream bloody murder and the police would come look for them. And he knew that there was one place the police would never think to check because why would they? Vanessa turns around to face Mike. Why would anyone? Mike's legs almost went out from under him as he replayed the gut wrenching moment when he watches the animatronics open up the torture chamber of the parking service room. His memory flashes onto Max's cleave in half body inside the animatronics, as if she was seeing what was Mike envisioning in his head. Vanessa said, "It's not just the ghosts, children inside those robots." Mike's stomach heaved. He kept his mouth shut. "It's their bodies," Vanessa said. The yellow light finger disappears and makes it seem like a dark shade has come down over the drawings. The shade came down over everything for an instant. Then four new light fingers extend down the ceiling. They point at the angle towards the two stage. Abby turns around, looking toward the stages. She claps her hands. These were her friends, Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica, stood at the microphone on the main stage. Foxy was set up in a smaller stage. They were all ready to put on the show. Vanessa took a few steps toward Mike. The folded paper was once again compressed in her closed hand, held to her chest. The hand was trembling. "You have to understand," Vanessa said. "The kids don't want to hurt anybody. It's him. He influenced them somehow." "Who?" "It wasn't their fault," Vanessa's tone was pleading now. "They were scared and alone. They didn't know any better." Vanessa held out her empty hand. "You have to believe me." Why did Mike think that Vanessa wasn't talking about the kids at Freddy's? He knew. Why? The urgency in Vanessa's tone was too intense. It sounded like she wasn't trying to justify the behavior of some of the ghost kids. Her tone was too personal for that. It sounded like she was begging for absolution. Mike stepped forward and put his hands on Vanessa's shoulders. He could feel them quaking in his grasp. She was scared out of her mind, Mike thought. Abby frowned at her friends. Why weren't they moving? The animatronics were frozen in place. They looked like sculptures. Abby's gaze shifted from one lit up friend to the next. She took a step forward. "Guys?" They still didn't move. The Vanessa switch clicked again. "They're almost childish. Please forgive me." Crimp between her brows disappears. Her jaws took on the hardness Mike has seen so many times before. Vanessa shrugged out from one of Mike's hands. She stepped back and when she spoke again, her voice had an edge. "I tried to warn you." Mike gave Vanessa a "you gotta be kidding" look. She nodded once again. "In my way, I really did. We're just too dense, too single-minded," she shrugged. "It's too late now. He knows you're looking for him." The resolve worried little girl Vanessa reappeared, hunching Vanessa's shoulders. "He'll be coming," she said, in a hustled tone. "Who's he?" Mike asked. Vanessa pressed her lips together. "Vanessa, please," Mike implored her. "You have to tell me." Vanessa held out the folded paper she held in a vice grip. "He's my father," she said. Vanessa shows out Mike a picture. Mike takes the paper. His hands begin to shake as he unfolds it. The paper was of an old, folded and refolded photograph. Mike grasps. "No," he whispered. He stares so hard at the photograph that his eyes start to hurt. The photograph begins to blur, but it didn't matter. He already seen it, and he could never unsee it. In the photo, a little girl with streaked blonde hair stood in front of bright, shiny Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. A screaming grand reopening banner fluttered from the eaves of the building. Beneath the banner was the four animatronics, were crouched down on one knee, surrounding the little girl, like they were once a big happy family. The girl grinning from ear to ear and in her hand she held Garrett's orange toy airplane. She drops the photo and takes a step back as if the photo was a bomb that would incinerate him. Mike lifts his gaze to Vanessa. He had to clear his throat twice before he could get his cords to work. When he could finally speak, his words sounded like they were rattling over a gravel road. You knew? Vanessa held out a hand. Mike, my brother, this whole time you knew. Vanessa shook her hand and her head. Not about Garrett, no, at least not when I met you. But the others? Vanessa looks down. I'm sorry, Mike, I'm so. The photo hasn't turned into a firestorm, but Mike's emotions did. All the shame, the confusion, and everything was insane to think about. Mike lunges forward and grasps Vanessa by her uniform collar. Tell me how to stop them, he growled. Tell me how to save my sister. If ever Mike expected to see the cops at Vanessa, it was now. But she didn't react with power. She shrank into a victim. Her eyes were so wide they almost filled her face. Abby took a stuttered step back when she saw the stage's speakers crackle. A sort of whiny feedback forced her to cover her ears. The multiple color performance lights sprang on, sweeping over the stage like a ribbon ribbons. Red ribbons, blue ribbons, yellow ribbons, orange ribbons, purple ribbons, light ribbons went every way. And finally, the animatronics came to life. They exploded to life. They all launched into a rock song that they were most famous for. Abby clapped her hands and started dancing. Chapter 22. In the driver's seat of Vanessa's police cruiser, Mike curled his fingers around the car, tip of the fingers, lit steering wheels, and stomped on the accelerator as he rounded a curve and hit a straightaway on the back road, then led on the aid station to Freddy's. The V8 engine rumbled, and Mike felt the cruiser power surge around him. He inhaled deeply, gathering his courage. The interior of the car smelled like Vanessa. If Mike closed his eyes, which he wasn't going to do, going this fast, he could convince himself he was sitting in the field of flowers under an apple tree eating a vanilla cookie, if only. The night was pitch black, and the only light on the road was created by the searchlight beam of his cruiser headlights. Surrounded by all the lead equipment inside the car, Mike felt like he was in the cockpit of a spaceship flying towards the far reach of the galaxy. It was too bad that the bells and the whistles that crowded the cruiser dashboard and middle consoles were no use to Mike. Too bad they were phaser and tordas or something like that. Unfortunately, the two-way radio, laptop, radar gun, electronics tickling the console video cameras were in the vehicle router, and automatic license plates reader were not going to help Mike save his sister. Electricity, Vanessa's voice says in Mike's head, with one eye of the spear of light drilling through the back of the tunnel of Cunno Road and Forest and one eye in the memory, Mike relays his preparation for returning to Freddy's. He's been ready to get to leave the aid station, bloody and shredded shirt back on. Mike clicks Vanessa's utility belt back into motion around his waist. The leather band was heavy because of all the compartments, and sleeves were stuffed full, except for the gun holster, but that wasn't going to matter anyways, because Vanessa wouldn't let Mike have her gun. Mike settled the belt as comfortably as he can feel his hip as Vanessa opens one of the tall supply cabinets and leans into it. Electricity is the key. Vanessa's voice was all muffled because her head was in the cabinet. Vanessa's head came out of the cabinet. She turned holding up what seemed to be a barbecue fork with a lightsaber like handle. Vanessa pushes a button on the handle, and a blue sizzle of electricity sparkles at the end of the fork. We use these for animal control. She walks toward Mike and points at the wrists. And you've got these two taser guns on the utility belt. They won't do permanent damage, but they'll do something to mess with animatronic circuitry. Hopefully buy you some time. The cruiser heavy duty ties hits a pothole deep enough to join the vehicle. Mike shuts off his mind replay. He glances at the cattle prop which lays his passenger seat. Would it really help? Given everything Vanessa has hid from Mike, could he trust her advice? Mike puts his attention fully back on the road, and when he did, he spots a faint red aura low in the distance. Neon red plus some red, yellow and white. Freddy's interior's lights were on. The blurriness helped reach out into the surrounding building, look up to Mike into a dear omen. It's pretty much screamed, abandon, hope y'all enter here. Cattle prop hanging from a loop on the utility belt, Mike rippled the tire iron he got from the cruiser trunk after he parked the car at the back edge of the pizzeria. He was sculling around the side of the grisly building, which struck him as a hostile enemy waiting for him in stealth mode, eager for the coming battle. Bending low, Mike ran his hand against the rough warp wood siding. You should avoid the main entrance, the memory of Vanessa guided him in his side. Look for the outlight vent of the east side of the building. It was sealed up years ago, but if you can get it open, that's the best way to get inside without being detected. Mike's palm translated from board to what felt like a rusty metal. Bingo. Step 1, find the vent opening. Done. Mike fumbles with the utility belt. He found the pen light compartment and he pulls it out. Aiming the light briefly as the metal he found, he saw that 3 2x4 had been nailed over the vents. Even in the hot on and off blip of the pen lights he shoved on the board, he could see that the lumpering was gray with age. Shouldn't be a problem to remove it. Mike groped around on the utility belt and found the sleeve that he was working with was a knife. Flipping it open, he used it at the end of the work to the nails to loosen up the boards. The back and forth motion made a wheezing screech. It wasn't too loud though. In just a few minutes, Mike had spread the board away from the vents. After that, his knife made quick work of loosening the covering of the sidings. Step 2, remove the vents and opening. Done. Mike drops to the ground and peers over the confident murks of the vent shafts. The penlights revealed a dusty mass of cobwebs just inside the opening. Mike sighs and swipes away the webs. He eats into the building and shakes himself forward. As he considers, his mind takes him back to the aid station. He replays his last few moments with Vanessa. When Vanessa hands over Mike the keys to the cruiser, their fingers get brushed together briefly. The effects of the touch lingers far after Vanessa drew her back hand in. Troubled by the puzzle of his feelings for this woman who flipped her from friend to foe, Mike has lifted his gaze to her face. He found her looking directly back at him. Of the emotions Vanessa has triggered on Mike, the promised one was now betrayal. Mike felt double-crossed, stabbed in the back. The probing of his pain and his wounds highlight that sensation. Could she see the bitterness in her eyes? Mike didn't know, but he could easily read his feelings. Vanessa was confronted with humiliation and regret. For an instinct, Mike has felt sorry for Vanessa, but then he thought about Garrett. How many? Mike asked. He clipped the words and swung them at her like he was hitting her with his own baton. Vanessa flinched and looked away. She avoided the question. You need to hurry. Mike dropped his voice into an aggressive snarl. How many, Vanessa? How many has your father killed? Vanessa gaze fitted up to Mike's face and then away again. I don't know, honestly, I don't know. Is Garrett? Mike couldn't finish the question. He swallows and tries again. Is my brother one of them in the machines? Vanessa looks at Mike and shakes her head. No, Garrett was before Freddy's. Mike felt the flames of his fear settled by inches. It was small but comforting, but at least his brother wasn't a ghost trapped in a robot. Mike collects himself. Garrett was gone, but he could save Abby. He has to get moving. Come with me, he says to Vanessa. Vanessa shakes her head rapidly. No. Mike leans towards her. You owe them to, and you owe it to me. Vanessa's head shakes even more, so much that her hair twists came undone, and her hair fell down to her back. I can't, Mike, she says. I can't. Obviously, seeing her refusal was rekindling the fire of his eyes and anger. She rushes on. It really can't. If he's there, I won't be any use to you. Believe me. Mike did. He looked into her eyes, so soft and blue right now. It seems like some of her instincts, life force, was leaching from her. He saw it clearly now. The reason for the way she acted, the choices she made. Vanessa has lived towards even more worse trauma than Mike has. She was beyond screwed up by her childhood. She was broken. Mike came out thoughtless. He really messed you up, didn't he? Vanessa turned away. She visibly quivered. Please, her voice was soft with instinct. You have to hurry. Mike visits the cruiser case. He nodded. As Mike turns away from Vanessa, he saw her sink to the floor. She sobs and follows him out of the aid station. The replay in Mike's mind faded out as a rabbit scrambled past him. Mike's reaction to the road and brought him to a dead stop. He could have sworn he was hearing Vanessa's sobs murmuring through the vent shaft. The pitifulness of the sounds warped around him, just as heaviness sticks sticky clumps of the cobwebs that clung to his hair, clothes, and knees. Mike wanted to cover his ears to block out the sounds, but he knew what it came from within him. And besides, he needs to have his hands and arms to continue his Ferdinand's army crawls. Even over the memory of his Vanessa's sobs, Mike could hear the sounds of 80 music. He heard it faintly when he was just a few feet around the building, and it got louder and louder as he promised and grossed through the shafts. The driving rock beat mumbled in the imagery of the sound of Vanessa's pain, and they brought Mike fully into the present. Mike inches his way against the torn shaft, and he saw a flare of pale light reaching towards him, toward the darkness. He was almost in the dining area, and Mike inches once again as he picks up the pace. This creates more noise, but the booming music masks the tinny banging of his knees against the metal ductwork. In just seconds, Mike is able to paint and reach the metal grate that has covered the end of the vent shaft. Though the slightest slats, you can see minimally into the dining room and the stage at the opposite end. Mike turns his head so he can push his face up against the slats. He puts his eyes to the opening. He chokes on one of his heavy breathing. Abby, Mike whispers urgently. Abby was flushed and sweaty from dancing to the music. Her friend's acting was amazing. All this time they've been performing. Abby seems to have been lost in the music. Now, though, Chico looks down at Abby and motions for Abby to come up to the stage. Yay, Abby thought. She hopped up to the stage and ran to her friend. Abby expected to be included in the performance, but instead Chica took her hands and pulled her back away from the microphones. While the others continued to dance and sing, Chica led Abby to the back of the stage. Abby was confused, but she didn't resist. Why should she? Chica was her friend. Abby went along wondering what Chica was up to. As Chica opened up the door and stepped into the halls, a really small one that had almost no light, Chica looked down into the halls, pulling Abby along by her hand. Although his view was obstructed, Mike could see through the door in the backstage area. Chico was leading Abby through the narrow corridor. Mike shoved at the metal grate. It didn't budge, but he could throw more power beneath his efforts. Mike pounded into the bent covering and continued to hold, grabbing into the needs to get through the opening. Mike's hands groped Vanessa's utility belt. There had to be something he could use to loosen up the vent covers. Abby trusted Chica, but crumpling the hallways made her think of a cave, a long cave underground and cut from the lights. It made her a little nervous. Abby was about to ask Chica where they were going when Chica stopped and let go of Abby's hand. The chick stepped back, and Abby saw an open doorway. What's in there? Abby asked. Chica raised and pointed a large feathery finger into the room. Still a little nervous but game, Abby shrugged and walked forward. She found herself in the room filled with tools and parts of robots. It was kind of achy looking. She didn't like seeing all the unconnected hands and arms and legs. Chica nudged Abby and points her again. Abby turns and she immediately hugged herself. She really didn't like what she was looking at now, not even a little. Seen in the kind of light Abby has seen in haunted houses on TV, a big red-haired doll with rosy cheeks laid in a metal chair. Abby didn't like either the doll, which was staring at the eyes and too wide of a smile, or the chair, which was ugly looking and hard to look at. Abby began backpedaling. She was no longer just a little nervous. She was feeling really bad, like something was going wrong. She thought it might be time to. A sound source like a purring cat, but not a friendly one, was coming from the doll. Abby struck in place by growing fear, and the tiniest bit of curiosity stirred at the doll. As Abby watched the doll's torso begin to open, the doll's inside looks like they were filled with sharp metal. Abby's curiosity went away. Scared was the only thing left. She backed up another step. Chica, Abby began to say. I don't like. Abby stuck in her breath when Chica lunged toward her. Before Abby could complete the breath or make another sound, Chica has grabbed Abby by the waist and lifted Abby off the floor. Mike finally got the grate loose. With the help of multiple things from Vanessa's duty belt, one punched sent the vent cover flying. It clattered over the floor, but the noise was barely very noticeable because the rock music was now blaring even more loudly. Its volume was nearly at the speakers, exploding decibels. Mike crawled out the vents onto the floor. There he lay still, looking toward the stage. Had the animatronics seen him come out the vent opening? It didn't seem like it. Foxy was still dancing on his small stage, and Freddy and Bonnie were seeing their lungs out, eyes closed, wiggling coggily. Figuring that if he stayed low, he could fly under the radar, Mike was began crawling toward the main stage. As he went, he kept an eye on the animatronics, but they were still oblivious. They were like feverish, lost in their performance. They moved with an almost maniacal intensity. When Mike reached the base of the stage, he raised his head. He needed to reach the doorway at the back of the stage, but Freddy and Bonnie were blocking his way. How could he get past them? As Mike hesitated, a distance, a loud clink, clink, chink prodded Mike, pondering into action. He leaped 2 feet and rolled towards the sound, which was coming from down the halls, not from the back of the stage. What if Chica had led Abby farther into the building into the roundabout way? Mike was no longer thinking about animatronics. He was thinking about Abby. He had to find her. Freddy's eyes opened. He stopped singing and dancing. He looked into Mike's directions. Mike immediately ducked low and scrambled backwards. After just a couple yards of retreat, his foot whacked against something, and he felt a splash of water soak his shoes and socks. He turned to buckets of soapy and now dirty. Water was still sitting on the base of the stage, right now where Mike has left them. Mike glances up on the stage, and Freddy was back to performing again. Good. The buckets have trickled the idea for the plan, one that just might work. Chica, no, Abby screamed as Chica carried her towards the metal doll in the metal chair. Chica has Abby by the torso, head in front of Chica's and legs behind. Grunting, Abby squirmed and twisted, but Chica's grip was strong. Chica flipped Abby over and over and began pushing her into the open door. Her heart was going faster than it ever had. Did everything she could do to stay away from the doll's scary metal parts. Abby kicked her legs like she was swimming. She threw her over her feet to drive her shoe into Chica's hips. She balled her hands into fists and pounded on Chica's arms. Abby's hissy fist like struggle slowed Chica down a little because the chick had tried to line Abby up with the doll, and she couldn't because Abby kept moving. However, Chica wasn't going to slow down enough. Abby knew why. She was just a little girl, and Chica was big and made of metal. Abby couldn't get free. She found herself being pushed back into the metal parts. Help! She shrieked. Abby really wanted her butter. She really, really did. Mike has gotten himself into a crouch next one to the buckets. When he heard Abby cry, the sounds moved him fast. Grabbing the buckets, Mike dashed toward the stage. He was fully visible to the stage now, but Freddie and Bonnie were too engrossed in their performance to notice. Mike slowly pulled out a bucket and tossed it to the contents of the stage floor. Right under Freddie's feet, Mike whirled and went for the second buckets. This one he threw towards Bonnie's feet. As soon as the second buckets were empty, Mike tossed it aside. He pulled one of the taser guns from Vanessa's utility belt and he planted it against himself in front of the stage. Mike fired the taser without hesitation. Instantly, the gun wired shot metal probes up and against the towards of the pool of the water. Beneath the animatronic's feet, an arc of blue electricity hits the water and corpse like a heat-seeking or robot-seeking missile against the feet. The electricity shot up and towards the animatronics. As they both stopped singing and dancing, they went stiff. The stage lights flickered as they went out. Both animatronics became redwoods. As they hit the stage, they'd been dropped from the top of the 50-story building. Wham! The impact shook the building foundation. While the floor beneath him was still pulsing, Mike turned. He ran towards the sound of his sister screaming for help. Abby was almost completely pressed into the dawn now. Her neck and back and legs and arms were hurt from the hard, sharp metal poking into her skin. Panting and crying, Abby was becoming too weak to fight anymore. Her throat was hurting from the screaming and yelling, and now she was crying, and her nose was stuffed up, and she was having trouble breathing. Abby looked up at Chica, and Abby has never been hurt and let down. Not even Mike has made her feel this bad before. Abby stiffs. Please, Chica, let me go. Chica didn't even look at Abby. The animatronics were reaching down. Abby started to grasp even more frankly for breath. She was sure Chica was about to close her into the doll. But then the haunted house light was gobbled up by a bright white light. Abby squinted and tried to see around Chica. Hey, Mike's voice shouted. Mike, Abby called out. I knew he'll come, she thought. Actually, Abby hadn't known Mike had arrived, but she hoped, and then her fear had made the hope go away, now that the hope was back. Mike has flipped on the main lights in the parts of service room, stood in the doorway. His taser gun was ready. Get the hell away from my sister, he yelled at the nasty yellow chick who was trying to shove Abby into the red-headed animatronic. Mike recognized the doll-like animatronic. It was the one he seen in the storage room. No way was he going to let Abby get close into the killing machine. Chica turned away from the metal chair, letting go of Abby. The robotic chick looked at Mike. Immediately, Mike triggered the taser gun. The taser wired streaming towards the air. The probe separated, and each of them drilled directly into Chica's eyes. Chica dropped as fast as hard as her companions did. She hit the floor into the position of the legs and arms, and she began to convulse. Her eyes blinked quickly. The instant Chica let go, Abby had shoveled herself away from the little girl animatronic. Now she jumped out of the chair and ran to Mike. She threw herself at him. Mike caught her sister in her arms. He hugged her close as she sobbed against his neck. Are you okay? Are you hurt? Mike felt Abby's head against her shoulders. No, she said in a tiny voice, but she was crying. Her tears were on Mike's skin, trickling down his shirt. Abby pulls her head away from Mike. She slowly glanced back at Chica. Mike looked that way too. Smoke was spiraling up from Chica's eye sockets. The chick was dead still. Abby sniffed loudly and said through more sobs, I don't know what's wrong with her. I don't know why she's acting like this. Mike pats Abby's shoulder. I know, it'll be okay. Keeping an eye on Chica, Mike set Abby on the floor, but he held on to her. When it was clear she was ready to steady on her feet. Listen to me, Abs. Mike puts his hands on Abby's shoulder. Abby pulls her gaze on from Chica and looks into Mike's eyes. He looks right back and leans closer to her. I've been an idiot, Mike says, about so many things. I need you to know that I'm sorry, okay? Everything I've been hung up on, none of it matters. You are the most important thing in my life, and I swear to you, I'm going to make sure you know that, and I'm going to show you every day how much you matter, okay? Everything's going to get better. Abby smiled Freddy briefly, then she swipes her tears from her face and gives Mike the biggest smile he'd ever given from her. Mike felt like his heart was blowing up like a massive hot air balloon, but what was filling him up wasn't a hot air, it was love. He gave Abby a smile to match her own. I love you too, Mike, Abby says. Then she glanced at Chica. We should probably go now, Abby added. Mike looks at Chica too. He gave Abby's shoulder a squeeze. Right, he straightened. Mike tucks away the taser gun. He uses both of it to cartridge. He wouldn't be a lot of help now. He pulls out the cackle and looks down at Abby. We have to assume that the others are also out of whack, he said. Abby nodded. Mike Lincoln's his free hand in her. Okay, he said. Let's get out of here. Mike aims them out of the room, then starts trotting back down the hallway. For the first 20 feet of their flight, Mike thought they had a good chance of getting away. But then he heard a wasp-like buzz down the halls. Tensing, Mike quickly looks over the shoulders. What the hell? A small hot pink ball was flying towards him. Coming with the speed of an arrow shot from a high-powered compound blow, Mike saw a flash of a white and the pink. He realized what he was seeing. Chica's cupcake. And then the pink ball was attached to his injured cuff. Mike below in pain, his legs went off from under him. The momentum of his fall disconnected Mike from Abby. He hit the floor and a solid impact and landing and knocked the carrot pod from his grasp. It skidded around the area. Mike! Abby started to crouch over Mike. Run! Mike shouted. Abby looked down the halls. Her eyes were flooded in terror, but she didn't move. Go! Mike urged, whipping his legs back and forth, trying to disconnect the cupcake. Hide! Abby finally ran, Mike now trying to whack the cupcake with his fist. Watches Abby dash across the room. Go, now! He thought when she made a beeline toward the arcade. Abby even raced past the small stage, heading towards the first row of the game areas. At the front of the edge of the arcade, she couldn't hide beneath the game, she thought. But Abby was worried about her brother, slowing her pace just a little. Abby stared to turn to look back toward Mike. That's when she felt it, the strong sense that someone was watching her. Abby whipped her head towards the small stage. At first she saw nothing, but then noticed a hint of movement. She quickly looked toward it, and she saw a ghost-like form of a little blue-eyed boy coming from beneath the small stage curtains. As fast as the boy appeared, he was gone. But Abby spotted something else. Two pinprick of red lights spits into view from the backstage. Abby's gaze was caught by more movement. The silver tips of Foxy's hook came into view. Abby ran harder than she's ever been had in her life. She shot down the first row of the game machines and disappeared. She hopped into the back of the arcade and hopped in, hoping to hide. Okay, we're gonna stop at like chapter 4, 20, 24. Not chapter 20. No, I said chapter 27, but we'll just stop at chapter 24. Although Mike could feel chomping teeth against the bandages on his legs, he was pretty sure that the cupcake was getting mostly a mouthful of gauze and paddings. It hadn't yet managed to sink its teeth into the meat of the leg. Mike flung his legs against the floor, using the hard surface to scrap the cupcake off him. The cupcake tumbled back. Mike immediately scrappled toward the Kaggle prod. When Mike was still a couple feet from the weapon, he stretched out his fingers. He almost got it. Mike screamed as a jaguar drop in pain shot up his leg. He looked back. The cupcake has reattached, and this time it got a better grip. It was at a healthy mouthful of Mike's calf. It was starting to gnaw its way up Mike's leg like it was an ear of corn. Mike flipped over and started using his right leg to kick the cupcake on the left leg. The cupcake hung on Mike, stomped on it once, twice, three times. Finally, his heel was managed to land a square in the center of the cupcake's googly eye face. The blow wrenched the cupcake free out of Mike's leg. Unfortunately, it took a good size of Mike's calf when it tumbled away. Mike was hit with a wave of nausea, but he ignored it. He also ignored the wash of the liquid warm pouring down his legs. He had to get the cargo prod. Mike surged toward the prod and he grabbed it. He fumbled to find the power switch. A clatter followed by a raspy buzz let Mike know that the cupcake was once again in motion. The buzzing sound grew louder, and Mike knew that the thing has launched itself toward back in the head. Mike spun from his stomach to his back. He brought back the cattle prod. His timing was impeccable. When he pointed the cattle prod to the space above his head, the prod screwed the cupcake right through its buckled-tooth mouths. A spark show similar to the one Mike had seen on the stage, but on a smaller scale, blew up right in front of his face. The sparks came from the cupcake's round wet eyes. Mike flickled the cattle prod, sending the cupcake flying. It hit the floor, rolled, and was still. This was when Mike's mind provided him with a sick vision of what would happen if he hadn't turned over. The cupcake would have landed on the back of Mike's head, would have chewed through him, the same way it got into the skull of the man Mike found in the parts and service room. Mike shook off the unwelcome inner movie, concentrated on getting to his feet. Abby risked and peeked around the bright red and gold side of the big arcade machine. Abby didn't know what kind of game this was. She immediately shrank back into her hiding spot. Foxy was standing in the front of the arcade next to the smashed prize cabinet. Abby has darted past less than a minute before. The animatronics, who used to be Abby's friends, was turning his head from side to side. His eyes were really bright red, looking mad. He said, trying to find Abby and not for anything good. Or maybe Abby was wrong, and maybe Foxy was still her friend. Maybe he wasn't mad at her. Maybe he was worried for her. She decided to take another look. Abby braced herself against the side of the big game cabinet. She started to lean forward, and her hands slid. Teeny mad music busted out loud. The magic of the machines light up and fired up. Ping and dings beat blip over Abby. Foxy's head whipped around. He shot his gaze toward the look at mean machine. Abby flattering herself over the cold metal sand machines while it's continuing to scream, "She's over here!" Abby must have gazed over a power button. Dumb, she thought. She should have been more careful. She should have tried to look again. She squeezed her eyes shut as she heard the stomp of Foxy's approaching footsteps. Then she challenged herself for being such a stupid idiot. She shot her away from the noisy machines and hurled toward the ball pit. Once there, she quickly lowered herself into the seas of many colorful plastic balls. Right before she pulled her head under the surface, Abby snuck a look toward where she's been hiding. Foxy has reached the still cabinet. He looked down and then looked around it. Abby kept very still beneath the plastic balls. She helped her breathe as she was underwater. Mike, limping heavily, reached the center of the dining room. He checked the stage. Freddy and Bonnie were still on the stage floor. Mike looked towards the small stage. It was empty. Where was Foxy? Abby? Mike called softly. He seen her towards the arcade. He headed that way. Mike was still severed from several feet from the arcade when he saw a voice calling out to him, a child's voice. Mike turns and felt the blood drain from his face. Standing in the archway that led to him was the lobby in the main corridor. It was a little boy that he recognized. Garrett? Mike whispered. Abby had started breathing again. She opened her mouth and took the gasp of her air, and another, silent little breaths. The air didn't smell good at all. It smelled like dirty and spoiled, like the food that was too old. But Abby did her best to ignore the yucky stink. She held upon herself, super durable and still. From the clumping footsteps, Abby could tell Foxy was getting close, and that they were playing the warmer quarter game. Foxy was getting warmer and a lot warmer. More clumps Foxy was hot, hot, hot. Abby was assured that if Foxy looked down, he'll be staring right at where she lays, hidden in the ball pit. She didn't move even the tiniest, teeniest muscle. Mike walks toward his little brother. Garrett didn't move. All Garrett did was stand in the archway. He sternly looked at Mike. Garrett? Mike said again, louder this time. He's here, Garrett said. The boy took a step backwards, then a second step. Wait, Mike called out. Mike hurried further as fast as he could. His legs wouldn't let him. He crossed a few feet beneath him, and Garrett a little more than a couple seconds. But when Mike was at the archway, Garrett was melted away. It's as Garrett became part of the gloaming of the archway. He was there, and then he was somewhere else. In Garrett's place, someone in a rabbit costume appeared. Not just someone, a man. Mike could tell this was the rabbit's height in the stride, and it was a grandstanding swank. The rabbit strode towards Mike. Mike puts on the brakes and begins backing up. He wanted to turn and run, but he couldn't take his eyes off the rabbit. The animatronics were ragged and dirty, but they looked precise compared to this rabbit costume. The rabbit looks like it's gone through an apocalypse. Drooped over and tattered, they were surrounded by smudges of black. The rabbit's yellow fur was molded, which looked disturbing, like blood. Its fur was torn away and shattered, stripes revealing spooges beneath. But the worst part about the rabbit is that it was striding towards Mike. It was smiling beneath the whiskers that appeared to be pointing towards Mike, very intensely. Mike immediately went for the second taser gun of Vanessa's utility belt. He aimed, it fired. The charge's metal prong hit their mark. They landed right in the middle of the rabbit's chest, but the rabbit was unfazed. It kept coming. Mike attempted another shot, but he wasn't fast enough. The rabbit quickly closed the distance beneath them. Without breaking the stride, the yellow rabbit whipped the taser plumb from his chest. He reached Mike and swapped the taser from Mike's hand. The taser hit the floor with a crunching and clacking noise. From the corner of his eyes, Mike saw it spin away. Before Mike could regroup, the yellow rabbit gave him a driving shove. The rabbit's strength was almost superhuman. Mike went flying backwards. His body hit the part of the fort that he and Abby had built with Vanessa and animatronics, which felt like it happened in another lifetime. Which Mike landed, he was sure he cracked the bones. Maybe it was just a leg giving away. Whatever it was, it hurted. And then that was just the start. As Mike crashed toward the fort above him came crumbling down. A torment of tables dropped towards Mike like big floor leg dominoes knocking into one another. At the same time, it felt like a shiver of darkness, evilness. The room was plunged into near darkness. The show lights began to shiver beneath him. Abby looked up towards the layers of colorness. Long, thick stripe of lights, neon crayons, were cutting through the air over the pit. Abby thought that the lights were pretty, and she wishes she could see them better, but she didn't move. It was a good thing she didn't, because there was something else up there too. Abby could see the foxy head coming down towards her. Groaning, Mike exhales himself from under the piles of the tables. He can feel the warm gush of blood flowing down from his leg. His calf has been bleeding since the cupcake has taken a bite out of him, and he hasn't been able to do anything about it. Now that the table's impact has sped up the bleeding, Mike could feel like blood coursing down his leg and soldering his socks. The liquid heat was confined to Mike's leg eater. From the sticky, wet sensation on his chest and his back, he knew his open wounds had reopened too. Mike needed to move, but he couldn't seem to get himself in gear. All he could do was belly squirm across the floor. Stopping to catch his breath, Mike looked around for the yellow rabbit. He had to squint to see. The constant movement for the yellow rabbit was really annoying for the poor guy. Thankfully, he didn't see the rabbit. Not thankfully, though, Mike did see the movement on the stage, or though he thought so. He turned his head and inched forward to get a better look. No, Mike thought. When he saw Freddy and Bonnie were back on their feet, Mike tried to get on his feet as well, but he couldn't. His blood loss was worse than he thought. Before the floor felt like it was back on the ship at sea, Mike tried again to push off the floor. He began to raise his upper body, and then he stopped. He found the yellow rabbit. It was coming his way. Before, it was the discordant laser lights. Now it's the rabbit looking like he was winking in all existence as it approaches. It was hard to focus on. That, however, didn't prevent Mike from noticing that the rabbit was pulling out a huge butcher knife. Mike looks beneath him. Freddy and Bonnie were still advancing towards the stage as the snail-paced Mike was moving. It wouldn't take the animatronics long to reach him. Mike turns front again. The rabbit was closer. Mike looks left and right. A wall on one side, the tables were on the other. He was cornered. Abby was barely breathing, which was a good thing. Not only did it keep her quiet, but it kept her from having to inhale the scents of the old dusty plastic ball pit. The cruddy surface of the ball pit made her uh-oh. Abby crinkled her nose and attempted to hold in the sneeze that tickled her nostrils, but she couldn't. Because she was trying to muscle in, Abby's sneeze came out as a hiss, but it still arrived, and it was loud enough for her. Strong hands clamped on Abby's shoulders. She felt herself being hoisted upwards. Abby immediately started kicking and screaming. She's trying to twist herself free, but Abby was held tight. She came out of the ball pit. She let out another sneeze. She turned to face Vanessa. Abby stopped fighting, and Vanessa pulled Abby the rest out of the way of the ball pit. She saw help Abby getting her foot on the floor. Abby brushed herself as she gained Vanessa, and she looked at Foxy. Vanessa was holding the kettle pot that Abby had last seen on Mike's hand, and Vanessa was on his back, around like he was having a fit. Abby turned her arms around Vanessa's waist. Vanessa used her free hand to return the hug. Abby pulled back. I don't know what's happening to our friends, she said. I don't know why they're trying to hurt us. Vanessa kneels down in front of Abby. Vanessa's hair was loose. It was tangled around her face. She looked wild, but when she spoke, her voice was calm. Abby, sweetheart, they're not themselves right now. Abby nodded. She felt like she was going to cry, but she didn't. Vanessa took one of Abby's hands. Listen, Abby, there's someone here who wants to hurt us badly. I need to get you somewhere safe. And then I need to go help your brother. I can help too. Vanessa starts to shake her head, but then her gaze went to Abby. Abby frowns, looking down to see what Vanessa was looking at. And she didn't see anything icky on her overalls. So what was the problem? Abby lifts her gaze to Vanessa's face. Vanessa's eyes were all wide, and she had to look at the people that got her on an idea. What? Abby asked. The drawings, Vanessa said. Her voice was half whispered, like she was amazed by something. She looked into Abby's eyes. It's the drawings. Vanessa tucked the cattle prod under her arms and grabbed Abby's shoulders. You're right, Abby said. You can help. Abby made a face. Huh? Vanessa started talking real fast. Your friends, they don't remember. He hurt them badly. He took their families. They took their lives. They took their lives and love. They don't remember though. I don't understand. Vanessa lets go of Abby's shoulder. She reaches out and pulls Vanessa and Abby a drawing pad from her overalls. You don't know what happened to them, Vanessa says, but they don't remember. Vanessa pulls out some pencils and uses them to tap on the pad. So tell them. Abby looks from her pad and pencils to Vanessa's face. What? Abby suddenly jumps back to the memory, a really recent one. She remembers seeing the spotlit drawings, the one of the yellow rabbit and the five kids. As her mind gets a close up, she saw the big smile drawn on their faces. The memory falls away, and Abby looks at Vanessa. The pictures. Vanessa nods and smiles. Abby reaches out her pen and her pencils and her pad. You're right. I have to help them remember. The yellow rabbit bores down at Mike, waving the butcher knife in the air like it was a baton, and the rabbit was a depraved orchestral conductor. Mike could stand and run. He couldn't drag himself away at the speed of light. He couldn't sink into the floor or turn invisible. All he could do was look up at the rabbit and say, Go to heck. The rabbit kicked Mike in the face. Mike's head recoils and the back of his skull hit the floor. The mother of all headaches kicked in again. Hot, thick, and compressed liquid fills Mike's mouth. It starts to run down his throat. He gags and spits it out. Mike tries to get his eyes to focus, but he didn't want to cooperate. They were somewhere out in La La Land, filled with butterflies. That was okay. Mike wasn't going to cower like a wimp. Summering the strength he had, Mike turned his head to face the rabbit again. I said, Mike said as clearly as he could, go to. The rabbit kicked Mike again. This time, Mike resolves to be hard, failed him. His head bounced off the floors again. In the middle of the butterflies turned confusion as the laser and the crooked teeth and the evil eyes of the inky shern visions of hell. Mike saw this mind choking landscape through a vapor of gray, even though he was able to see the knife raised above his chest. And he fought to stay conscious and began to lose the battle. Mike heard, That's enough. Was that Vanessa's voice? It didn't matter. Mike agreed he had enough. He stopped fighting. He closed his eyes and let his consciousness take a break. Tucked against his shoulder, a battered ping pong machine that was the missing glass. Abby sat against the floor. She was hidden, but she could see the dining area. She was looking into her drawing pad, her pencil scribbling as fast as she could, making it move. When Vanessa shouted, though, Abby looked up. Abby had to press her lips together to stop the crying from coming out. Her brother was lying towards the floor. Blood was all around him. A yellow rabbit holding a knife stood around Mike and Vanessa. Was maybe 20 feet beneath the rabbit, and she held a gun in both her hands. The way Abby has seen on TV. On TV, though, Cop's hands didn't shake the way Vanessa's hands were shaking. The rabbit's knife stopped in midair, but the rabbit didn't turn around. Vanessa's hands shook even harder. Abby wanted to watch what was happening over by her brother, but the only way she could help Mike was to keep drawing. So she did, back down on her pad. As she did, she thought she saw movement to her left. Abby glanced that way. Nothing. Where was Foxy? Was she down? Was he still down? It didn't matter. Abby had to finish her drawing. From the dining room area came the sound of a loud growl from the rabbit. Abby thought she caught her lower lip between her teeth and put her pencil to the page again. Drop the knife, Vanessa said. Abby started spinning her attention beneath the drawing and what was going on with Vanessa and the rabbit. That wasn't a hard thing to do. Vanessa was used to watching TV while she drew. She knew Mike thought she didn't watch TV, but she did. Abby drew, and Abby watched as the rabbit back still to Vanessa, began to remove the rabbit's costume head. Vanessa's shaking got worse. Abby could see that now that the person inside the rabbit suit was a man with gray and dark hair. A little old for temper tantrums now, aren't we, Vanessa? He said. Abby's pencil fluttered. She didn't like the look of the man at all. He had a thin and high forehead. He also had narrow eyes. He looked slimy and skinny. I'm not kidding, Dad, Vanessa said. Drop it. Dad, Abby thought. Poor Vanessa. It's over, Vanessa says. I don't think so, sweets, the man says. You may have forgotten your loyalties, but I assure you, they have not. The man gestures towards Freddy and Bonnie, who are at the front of the edge of the stage. They were standing at his attention. Go on, the man said to the animatronics. He points at Mike, rip him into little bitty pieces. Freddy and Bonnie stared across the stages, heading to a short flight of stairs. They weren't walking quite right, but they were walking well enough to get Mike's attention, and then looking at Abby as well, wanting them to. The man in the rabbit suit looks at Vanessa. Now, why don't you put that silly thing away and help Daddy clean up the mess you made? He took a step toward Vanessa. We both know you won't actually use the sound of the shot made Abby's pencil scoot across the page in a jagged line. The point of the pencil broached the paper. Abby ignored both the line and the hole in the pencil as she kept drawing, ignoring both the sound and the noise. At the same time, she saw the man kind of jump backwards. He looked down his shoulder. Abby could see that Vanessa's bullet has put a hole in the rabbit's suit and the man. The man didn't seem to be bothered by the bullet, but he could speak. He was angry. Abby could tell. The man snarled at Vanessa and put his rabbit head back on. Then he charged towards her. Abby wasn't as startled by the time 3 times the gun fired. She knew she didn't have much time left. She forced herself to keep drawing, even as she watched Vanessa's shots go past the rabbit. Vanessa was shaking, too much to aim right. Abby thought, and then where was the man in the rabbit suit? Was able to reach Vanessa and grab her by the throat. You have one job, the rabbit said. Keep him in the dark and kill him if he found out too much. Vanessa spits in her dad's face. That's 2 jobs, she said. You tell him, Abby thought, still drawing. Shut up, the yellow rabbit screams. At the same time, he shoves a big, awful knife into Vanessa's stomach. Abby felt her stomach getting real tight, and she felt like she was going to throw up, but she didn't. She kept drawing. The rabbit dug his finger tighter and tighter into Vanessa's throat, lifting her up. Vanessa's feet flopped in the air several inches above the floor. Abby screwed up her face. Abby was so scared for Vanessa, and Abby thought she could feel icky, furry rabbit fingers wrap around her own neck, but she kept drawing. Vanessa clawed at her dad's chokehold. She tore at her dad's hand, but she didn't let go. As she fought, Vanessa looked toward Mike. Abby shot a glance at her brother, too. Her pencil made one last mark on the pad. Freddie and Bonnie had reached Mike. Time to go. Abby got up and ran. Vanessa was once again staring into the evil rabbit's eyes. The rabbit was still choking Vanessa with one hand and was totally focused on her. He didn't see Abby at first, but Vanessa did, and she smiled. Abby ran towards the wall of pictures. Her drawings flapped like birds, wings in her hands. No, the man in the rabbit suit yelled. Uh-oh, he's seen Abby. Abby flicked and looked at the rabbit, but she didn't slow down, not even when the rabbit let go of Vanessa's neck and turned toward her. Stop, Vanessa shouts. Abby knew Vanessa wasn't talking to her, but Abby stepped falling when she saw that Vanessa had dropped her hands. Vanessa turned when she saw that Vanessa had dropped her hands. Vanessa was grabbing at the blade of the knife, which was sticking out of her stomach. The rabbit still had one of the hands on the other end of the knife. The rabbit looked down, grunting. He tugged the knife out of Vanessa's belly, but Vanessa wouldn't let go. Abby couldn't see that Vanessa was hurting bad. Vanessa's face was really white and it was twisted up, but she still managed to say in a gasp, I won't let you hurt her too. And we stop at chapter 24. We're gonna start maybe like on the 30th or like 31st. Thank you for joining. Goodbye.